Throughout history, countless millions have held the belief that Noah's Ark found its final resting place upon Mount Ararat, located in what we now call Turkey. However, the startling reality is that the authentic mountains of Ararat have vanished into the depths of time. The real location has been concealed under countless layers of historical events and political turmoil from ages past. In this exploration, we're about to reveal the complete history surrounding these vanished mountains, uncover the reasons why everything you've learned about their location could be entirely incorrect, and examine evidence that has the potential to completely transform one of the most ancient narratives known to humankind. Now, before we begin our journey, if this is your first time visiting this channel, think about pressing that like button and hitting subscribe. The support you provide allows us to keep creating this kind of content, helping you discover something fascinating or simply enjoy your free time. Additionally, share with us your current location and the time where you are right now. We would really enjoy hearing from you. So then, with no more delays, shall we begin? Let's get started. The earliest explorers. Heavy boots crunch through the snow. We find ourselves in the year 1829, and a Russian soldier in his youth, Jacob Parrott by name, gazes upward toward the white summits of Mount Ararat. His breathing creates misty clouds in the atmosphere's thin layers. The companions traveling with him express doubts about the wisdom of attempting this ascent. The mountain looms above them, waiting silently. Parrott achieves the distinction of becoming the first documented individual to stand upon Ararat's highest point. The door his achievement opens will remain forever ajar. Across the European continent, word begins spreading about this mountain where the Ark of Noah could potentially be resting. The concept captures both minds and hearts in a manner that few narratives ever accomplish. A wave of explorers arrives at this isolated corner of the Ottoman Empire throughout the 1800s. These individuals come from varied backgrounds, yet all of them carry one intense question burning within them. Is it possible that the biblical Ark still exists somewhere on these mountainous slopes? Scientific pursuits motivate some arrivals, while others come seeking adventure. A significant number possess profound religious faith that propels them onward in spite of clear dangers ahead. British diplomat James Bryce makes his appearance in 1876, equipped with meticulous plans and scholarly intentions. He spends time studying maps, seeking advice from local guides, and preparing for months in advance. French botanist Joseph Pitton de Tournefort had made his attempt at the climb in earlier decades, but couldn't complete the journey to the peak. German naturalist Friedrich Parrott traces his brother's route in 1834, bringing along scientific instruments and comprehensive journals. These pioneering seekers confront challenges that would discourage the vast majority of people. Foreign explorers are viewed with suspicion by the Ottoman authorities. Kurdish tribes controlling the lower mountainsides insist on payment in exchange for safe travel. The mountain itself continuously presents threats. Storms arrive suddenly, crevasses remain hidden from view, and altitude sickness can leave those climbing in states of confusion and weakness. Ararat's weather transforms without any warning whatsoever. Sunshine in the morning transitions into blizzards by afternoon. Within mere hours, temperatures plummet by 40 degrees. Ice crystals carried by the wind can cut any skin left exposed. Those attempting the climb must transport everything they require, since no rescue operations exist should anything go awry. Many explorers push themselves beyond what reason would suggest, driven by religious motivation. They hold the belief that discovering the Ark would demonstrate biblical truth to a world becoming increasingly skeptical. Traditional beliefs about creation face challenges from Darwin's theories. Ancient texts have their literal truth questioned by scientific discoveries. Physical evidence to support their faith is what these climbers seek. Each individual faces different tests from the mountain. The first signs of difficulty cause some to retreat. Clear warnings go unheeded by others who continue pushing forward. Russian officer Hermann Abich conducts multiple attempts throughout the 1840s, creating maps of the mountain's geological features, while simultaneously searching for wooden remnants. Future expeditions build upon the groundwork his careful observations establish. Armenian communities in the local area possess deep-rooted beliefs regarding the Ark's presence on Ararat. Stories handed down across generations tell of shepherds who caught glimpses of wooden beams positioned high upon the mountain. The hope of explorers gets fueled by these tales, while additional layers of mystery get added to their quest. Difficulties arise in communication between visiting foreigners and local guides. Misunderstandings develop concerning routes, weather patterns, and expenses, creating tension in the process. Some expeditions experience failure before they truly commence due to these fundamental problems. Through luck and determination, others manage to succeed despite inadequate planning. Patterns get established by the early searchers that expeditions in the future will follow. The southern slopes become their approach of choice, offering the most gentle gradient. European equipment gets brought along while they depend on knowledge from locals. Documentation of everything observed creates records that will undergo study and debate for decades to come. With each expedition, the mythology surrounding Ararat continues growing. New attempts receive inspiration from success stories. Tales of caution emerge from failures, though few appear to pay attention to them. With every passing year, the mountain's reputation expands, pulling more seekers toward its slopes. For these early explorers, money represents a constant source of concern. Funds become necessary for travel, equipment, guides, and bribes to local officials when organizing an expedition. Some individuals who climb mortgage their homes or search for wealthy patrons. Others make their arrival with minimal resources, hoping ingenuity will allow them to make do. From scholarly curiosity to popular obsession, the search for Noah's Ark undergoes transformation. Reports in newspapers about expeditions reach audiences throughout Europe and America. Books about the adventures receive commissions from publishers. The mountain enters popular culture, becoming a symbol representing mystery and divine presence. Everything that follows builds upon the foundation these first searchers create. Future generations of Ark hunters receive inspiration from their accounts. Templates for later expeditions emerge from their methods. Lessons about the mountain's dangers come from their failures. Their successes demonstrate that reaching the summit is achievable, even though finding the Ark continues to remain elusive. The 19th century reaches its conclusion, with Ararat firmly positioned as the focus of biblical archaeology. Some of its secrets have been revealed by the mountain to these early climbers, while its greatest mystery remains concealed. The stage for even more dramatic adventures yet to come gets set by their courage and curiosity. The shadow of Ararat. From the Armenian plateau, the mountain rises, with the appearance of a giant in slumber. Its massive bulk gets crowned by two peaks. Greater Ararat extends 16,945 feet upward into the sky, with Lesser Ararat positioned beside it, standing at 12,782 feet. Together, they dominate the horizon across 100 miles in all directions. Divine power was perceived by ancient peoples in the imposing presence of Ararat. The mountain stands in isolation, belonging to no range, which makes it visible across vast distances. Dawn's first light gets caught by its snow-covered summit, and sunset's last glow gets held there as well. An aura of significance beyond this world gets created by this isolation. Over millions of years, volcanic activity gave Ararat its shape. The mountain's last eruption occurred in 1840, sending tremors throughout the region and serving as a reminder to everyone of the forces resting beneath its peaceful exterior. Steam vents continue to warm certain areas near the summit, creating pockets where snow melts even during winter. Different meanings get carried by the mountain's name across cultures. Armenians refer to it as Masis, giving honor to an ancient king. Among Turks, it's known as Agri Dagi, meaning mountain of pain. Kurdish people call it Chia Agiri, the fiery mountain. How different groups experience this towering presence gets reflected in each name. Geological stories spanning eons get told by Ararat's slopes. Evidence of ancient settlements appears at the lower elevations, with scattered pottery and stone tools present. Volcanic rock dominates the landscape as elevation increases. Near the summit, whatever lies beneath gets preserved in frozen silence by glacial ice. A unique environment, gets created by weather patterns around Ararat. The mountain generates its own climate, pulling moisture from clouds that pass, and creating storms without warning. Between base and summit, temperatures can vary by 50 degrees. These conditions make the mountain simultaneously beautiful and treacherous. At the center of national identity, Armenian culture places Ararat, ARA. The mountain makes its appearance on the country's coat of arms, in spite of lying within Turkish borders. Armenian poets compose works about its beauty. Its changing moods become subjects for artists. Stories about ancestors who lived in its shadow get passed down through families. Beyond Christianity, the mountain's spiritual significance extends. Long before Abrahamic religions arrived, local shamanic traditions honored Ararat. The mountain's sacred nature gets mentioned in Zoroastrian texts. Whether the ark landed here or on another peak entirely remains a subject of debate among Islamic scholars. With altitude, Ararat's ecosystem undergoes dramatic changes. Agriculture and small communities receive support from fertile valleys at the base. Oak forests provide habitat for wildlife while covering the middle slopes. Above the tree line, alpine meadows experience brief blooming periods each summer. The summit zone remains locked in winter permanently. As a natural border between Turkey and Armenia, the mountain serves its purpose. Complexity gets added to any exploration by this political division. Turkish authorities must grant permits. Diplomatic tensions arise from Armenian claims to the mountain. Heavy monitoring of the border gets maintained by both nations. Over centuries, local communities have adapted to life in Ararat's shadow. The mountain's moods can be understood by them. Weather signs can be read, and seasonal patterns are familiar. Their knowledge proves invaluable to visiting explorers, though language barriers frequently complicate communication. In all directions, the mountain's water sources flow, feeding rivers that provide nourishment to 3 countries. The Aras River begins here, flowing east toward the Caspian Sea. Into Georgia, other streams flow north and south into Turkey. This makes Ararat a geographic center as well as spiritual one. Unusual properties get shown by Ararat's magnetic field, which some connect to its legendary significance. In certain areas, compass readings can prove unreliable. Near the summit, electronic equipment sometimes experiences malfunctions. Scientists attribute these effects to the mountain's volcanic composition, but deeper meaning gets found by mystery seekers. An almost hypnotic effect gets created by the mountain's changing appearance throughout the day. Every detail of its ridges and valleys gets revealed by morning light. The summit often gets obscured by afternoon clouds. Into shades of pink and gold, the snow becomes transformed by evening alpenglow. Crystalline clarity arrives at night, beneath skies filled with stars. Far beyond its physical presence, Ararat's shadow extends. Weather patterns across the region receive influence from the mountain. Wind currents and precipitation get affected by its bulk. Microclimates created by the mountain's interference with normal atmospheric flow get experienced by surrounding areas. Over access to Ararat, strict control gets maintained by Turkish authorities. The mountain sits in a sensitive border region where security concerns carry more weight than tourism potential. Approaches get monitored by military checkpoints. Extensive paperwork and official approval become required for climbing permits. To the mountain's mystique, these restrictions add another layer. Ongoing risks for climbers get created by the mountain's geological instability. Lower slopes face threats from rockfall. Snow bridges conceal crevasses. Without warning, avalanches can sweep downward. Throughout history, these dangers have claimed lives, adding to Ararat's reputation as a destination both beautiful and deadly. Around the world, Ararat's cultural impact extends through Armenian diaspora communities. Generations after families left the region, the mountain still gets spoken of with reverence. In their sanctuaries, churches display images of Ararat. A symbol of lost homeland and enduring faith is what the mountain becomes. For billions of people who may never see it, the mountain's presence in biblical tradition gives it significance. Sunday school lessons feature Ararat as the place where life began anew following the flood. Hope, survival, and divine protection in ways that transcend its physical reality get represented by the mountain. The ancient origins of the story of the Ark. Long before Genesis reached its final form, through ancient Mesopotamian culture, flood stories flowed like rivers through fertile plains. Around 2100 BCE, the earliest known version makes its appearance in the Epic of Gilgamesh, carved into cuneiform tablets. In this tale, Utnapishtim receives warning from the gods of coming destruction, and receives commands to build a vessel for preserving life. By centuries, the Sumerian flood myth preceded even Gilgamesh. Divine warning gets received by King Ziusudra, and a boat gets constructed to survive the deluge. Familiar patterns get followed by the story: divine anger, chosen survivor, animal rescue, and eventual redemption. Through cultures across the ancient world, these elements would echo. Real experiences with devastating water get reflected in Mesopotamian flood narratives. The region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers faced regular flooding capable of destroying entire cities. Archaeological evidence reveals layers of flood deposits in ancient settlements. The mythological accounts likely drew inspiration from these natural disasters. Into its cosmic story, the Babylonian creation epic, Enuma Elish, incorporates flood themes. Chaotic waters get battled by the gods to create order from primordial chaos. Both destruction and renewal, death and rebirth, get represented by water. These dual meanings permeate flood mythology across cultures. From common cultural wells, ancient writers drew when crafting their stories. To 1800 BCE, the Akkadian Atrahasis epic dates, telling of divine displeasure with human noise and overpopulation. A flood gets sent by the gods to reduce humanity's numbers. Breeding pairs of animals get saved by the hero Atrahasis, and the catastrophe gets survived. On the Nile's annual inundation rather than cosmic destruction, Egyptian flood myths focus. From river clay, the god Khnum molds humans. When the Nile floods, divine renewal rather than punishment gets represented. In different ways, this more positive view of flooding influences later flood stories. Through the story of Deucalion and Pyrrha, Greek mythology contributes its own flood narrative. To destroy corrupt humanity, Zeus sends a flood. A chest gets built by Deucalion to survive the waters. After the flood recedes, the earth gets repopulated by him and his wife through throwing stones that become people. Clear connections to these earlier narratives get shown by the biblical flood story in Genesis. Divine warning gets received by Noah, like Utnapishtim. An ark gets built to specific dimensions. In pairs or groups of 7, animals enter. On a mountain, the vessel comes to rest after the waters recede. Evidence that land has emerged gets brought by a bird. Whether Genesis directly borrowed from Mesopotamian sources or whether all these stories stem from common ancient traditions remains debated by scholars. Too numerous to ignore are the parallels. How each culture adapted the basic story to reflect their own values and beliefs gets revealed by the differences. As both historical accounts and symbolic teachings, these flood stories got understood by ancient audiences. Universal human concerns got addressed by the narratives: divine justice, moral behavior, environmental catastrophe, and survival against overwhelming odds. Frameworks for understanding natural disasters and human responsibility got provided by them. In its combination of cosmic scope and personal drama, the flood story's power lies. Destruction faces the entire world, but survival gets determined by individual choices. Across cultures and centuries, this tension between universal and particular makes the story relevant. On ancient flood traditions, archaeological discoveries continue to shed light. Flood deposits that may have inspired the mythological accounts get revealed by excavations at Babylon and other Mesopotamian sites. That historical flooding events provided raw material for the stories get suggested by these findings. The interconnected nature of ancient civilizations gets demonstrated by the transmission of flood stories across cultures. More than goods got carried by trade routes. Stories, beliefs, and cultural practices got spread by them. From Mesopotamia to neighboring regions, The flood narrative traveled, adapting to local conditions and beliefs. Multiple functions beyond entertainment get served by ancient flood stories. Moral frameworks get established, natural phenomena get explained, and hope during disasters gets provided. Divine reward gets received by the survivor's faithfulness. That proper behavior can ensure survival even in the face of cosmic catastrophe gets suggested by the story. How stories grow and change over time gets shown by the evolution of flood narratives. On divine caprice and human survival, early versions focus. Moral lessons and divine justice receive emphasis in later accounts. Covenant theology and promises of divine faithfulness get added by the biblical version. Why the flood story resonates so powerfully across cultures gets explained by these ancient origins. Into deep human fears about natural disasters and moral judgment, the narrative taps. Hope that faithfulness and preparation can overcome seemingly impossible challenges gets offered by it. For later religious traditions, the Mesopotamian background of the flood story doesn't diminish its significance. Instead, how ancient peoples grappled with similar questions about divine justice, human responsibility, and survival in an uncertain world gets demonstrated. In its ability to address these universal concerns, the story's enduring power lies. Why Mount Ararat became associated with the flood story gets helped by understanding these ancient origins. A natural choice for where the ark might have landed got made by the mountain's imposing presence and location in a region familiar with flood traditions. Authority that continues to inspire modern searchers gets given to the story by its ancient roots. The power of the biblical narrative. With stark simplicity that belies its profound impact, the flood account gets presented by the book of Genesis. Human wickedness gets seen by God, and a decision to cleanse the earth with water gets made. Favor in divine eyes gets found by Noah alone. According to precise specifications, an ark gets built by the chosen man, animals get gathered, and the storm that destroys all other life gets ridden out. For three major world religions, this narrative becomes foundational. As a righteous man who preserved life through divine guidance, Noah gets honored by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all. In the Torah, the Christian Bible, and the Quran, the story appears. Different aspects receive emphasis by each tradition, while the core elements get maintained. As prefiguring salvation through Jesus Christ, the flood story got seen by early Christian writers. Safety for believers while the world faces judgment gets provided by the ark representing the church. Peace brought by the Holy Spirit gets symbolized by the dove that returns with an olive branch. Layers of meaning beyond its surface narrative get given to the story by these interpretations. As literal historical fact, the flood account got treated by medieval scholars. The ark's dimensions got calculated, debates occurred about how all animals fit inside, and wondering happened about practical details like waste disposal and freshwater storage. Scholarly investigation and creative problem-solving for centuries got driven by these questions. In ways that elevated the flood story's importance, biblical literalism got emphasized by the Protestant Reformation. That scripture contained scientific as well as spiritual truth got argued by reformers. If covering the whole earth with the flood got said by the Bible, then geological evidence should support that claim. Centuries of ark-seeking would get driven by this perspective. The literal interpretation of the flood story got challenged by Enlightenment thinkers. That Noah could gather animals from every continent got mocked by Voltaire. For a worldwide flood, no evidence got found by geologists. To defend the narrative's historical accuracy or reinterpret its meaning, these criticisms forced religious thinkers. New pressures on traditional flood interpretations got brought by the 19th century. Whether all species could have descended from ark survivors got questioned by Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Earth's ancient age and complex history got revealed by geological discoveries. Flood myths in many cultures got found by anthropologists, suggesting the story wasn't unique to biblical tradition. Rather than weakened, some believers' commitment to the flood story's literal truth got strengthened by these challenges. If biblical accounts got contradicted by scientific evidence, then the evidence must be wrong or incomplete. Expeditions to find the Ark as proof of Scripture's accuracy got motivated by this perspective. Power beyond historical questions got given to the flood story by its moral dimensions. Clear consequences for human behavior get presented by the narrative. Divine protection gets received by righteousness. Destruction gets brought by wickedness. Across cultures and centuries, these themes resonate, making the story relevant to each generation. Flood literalism as a test of Christian orthodoxy got made by American fundamentalism in the early 20th century. Accusations of undermining biblical authority got faced by believers who questioned the story's historical accuracy. Strong motivation to find physical evidence supporting the narrative got created by this pressure. A framework for understanding natural disasters as divine judgment gets provided by the flood story. When strikes occur from earthquakes, hurricanes, or floods, some interpret these events through the lens of Noah's experience. That God uses natural forces to accomplish moral purposes gets suggested by the story. To support the flood story's ancient origins, archaeological discoveries in the 20th century seemed flood deposits that might reflect historical events behind the narrative got revealed by excavations at Mesopotamian sites. The story's essential truth to be maintained, while its complex development got acknowledged, got allowed by these findings for believers. Hope during difficult times gets offered by the flood story's promise of divine faithfulness. That God will never again destroy the earth with water gets signified by the rainbow becoming assurance that despite apparent chaos, divine purposes will ultimately prevail gets provided by this covenant. From random events into meaningful experiences, natural disasters get transformed by the story. New relevance gets given to the flood story by modern environmental concerns. The ancient narrative's themes of global catastrophe and human responsibility get echoed by climate change and rising sea levels. Current environmental challenges as parallel to the conditions that prompted the original flood get seen by some. With conservation efforts today, the story's emphasis on preserving animal life resonates. Remarkably modern seems Noah's careful attention to maintaining biodiversity. The flood story to support wildlife protection and habitat preservation sometimes gets invoked by environmental groups. To international concerns, the flood narrative's global scope makes it relevant. As a worldwide problem requiring coordinated response, environmental catastrophe gets presented by the story. International cooperation on climate change and disaster preparedness gets supported by this perspective. A complex moral framework gets created by the story's combination of divine sovereignty and human responsibility. The flood gets sent by God. But faithfully to survive, Noah must respond. Throughout biblical literature, this balance between divine action and human agency appears and continues to influence religious thought. In its ability to address fundamental human concerns about justice, survival, and divine purpose, the flood story's power lies. That moral behavior has cosmic significance gets suggested by the narrative. Not just personal fate, but the survival of all life gets affected by individual choices. Extraordinary weight gets given to ordinary decisions by this perspective. Why Mount Ararat attracts so many seekers gets helped by understanding the flood story's power. Physical proof of the narrative's truth gets represented by the mountain. Not just ancient history but also divine promises and moral teachings would get validated by finding the Ark. As much as scientific investigation, the search becomes an act of faith. The forbidden slopes of the mountain. Like a fist, the Ottoman Empire's grip on Mount Ararat tightened. Around the 19th century, with deep suspicion, foreign expeditions got viewed by Sultan Abdul Hamid II. As spies for rival powers, European explorers seeking Noah's Ark might serve. A potential security risk got made of every climbing permit by the mountain's strategic location near Russian and Persian borders. From would-be climbers, extensive documentation got demanded by Ottoman officials. Detailed itineraries, equipment lists, and explanations for every piece of scientific equipment got required. Without explanation, local governors could deny access. Many expeditions got discouraged by these bureaucratic barriers while corrupt officials who demanded bribes for cooperation got enriched. Into a military zone, The region got transformed by the Russo-Turkish Wars of 1877 to 1878. Toward Ararat, Russian forces advanced while defensive positions got fortified by Ottoman troops. Rather than a destination for biblical archaeology, the mountain became a battlefield. Scientific instruments on the slopes got replaced by explosive shells. Terrible consequences got faced by Armenian communities caught between warring empires. Armenian Christians of supporting Russian Orthodox armies got suspected by the Ottoman government. Armenian villages near Ararat got targeted by massacres in 1895 and 1896. With blood instead of providing sanctuary for scientific exploration, the mountain slopes ran red. A maze of restrictions that changed without notice got created by border tensions. From climbers one month, areas open became military zones the next. For crossing invisible lines or entering forbidden valleys, expeditions might get arrested by Turkish authorities. More treacherous than its physical terrain, the mountain's political landscape proved. Access routes to Ararat's base got controlled by Kurdish tribal leaders. From passing expeditions, tribute got demanded, and guides who knew secret paths got provided. Outside official Ottoman control, these tribal relationships operated, creating parallel systems of permission and protection. From both government officials and tribal chiefs, approval got needed by climbers. Another layer of complexity got added by the British Empire's interest in the region. Russian expansion toward India wanted to be prevented by Britain. Strategic purposes, while advancing biblical archaeology, might get served by supporting expeditions to Ararat, of carrying intelligence-gathering missions disguised as scientific research. Every British climber got suspected by Turkish officials. New diplomatic pressures got created by German influence in the Ottoman Empire. Opportunities for German expeditions got opened by Kaiser Wilhelm II's friendship with Sultan Abdul Hamid II, while for other Europeans, doors got closed. In the complex game of European power politics, the mountain became a pawn. More liberal policies toward foreign researchers initially got promised by the Young Turk Revolution of 1908. Of modernizing the empire and welcoming scientific investigation, new leaders spoke. However, slowly came practical changes. Old practices got continued by local officials, while from Constantinople, clear signals got waited for. To foreign expeditions, Ararat effectively got closed by the First World War. In the heart of the Russian-Turkish battleground, the mountain sat. Of people who might have guided climbing expeditions, the region got emptied by Armenian deportations. More important than archaeological discovery, survival became because of the war's devastation. New complications got created by post-war boundary changes. To Armenia, the Treaty of Sèvres initially granted Mount Ararat. This arrangement got rejected by Turkish forces under Mustafa Kemal, and the mountain got reclaimed. Turkish sovereignty got confirmed by the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923, but Armenian claims never fully disappeared. Over Ararat, strict control got maintained by the new Turkish Republic. Secular nationalism over religious considerations got emphasized by Kemal Ataturk's government. About Kurdish separatism and Armenian irredentism, more than biblical archaeology, officials worried. To most foreign researchers, the mountain remained off-limits. Additional border tensions got created by Soviet control of eastern Armenia. Between NATO member Turkey and the Soviet Union, the mountain now stood. Scientific curiosity got trumped by Cold War security concerns. Particular scrutiny got faced by American expeditions due to their country's membership in the Western Alliance. Around Ararat during the Cold War, military checkpoints multiplied. Every vehicle approaching the mountain got inspected by soldiers. Special attention got attracted by telephoto lenses and radio equipment. With international espionage concerns, the simple desire to search for Noah's Ark became entangled. New layers of restriction got added by Kurdish insurgency in southeastern Turkey. The entire region, dangerous for civilians, got made by the PKK's armed campaign against Turkish forces. No-go zones that changed location without warning got created by military operations around Ararat. Between opposing forces, climbers might find themselves caught. Only its mystique got increased by the mountain's forbidden nature. More valuable, every expedition seemed, because of restricted access. To supporters back home, climbers who reached the summit despite official obstacles became heroes. More significant, any discoveries seemed because of the difficulty of getting permission. Complex permit systems that few understood completely got developed by Turkish authorities. Months of preparation and substantial fees got required by application processes. Constant supervision by government officials got faced by approved expeditions. Only the most determined seekers to proceed got allowed by these restrictions, while casual climbers got filtered out. Beyond its physical presence, the mountain's political significance extended. On Armenian currency and national symbols, despite lying within Turkish borders, Ararat appeared. Even more sensitive about foreign activities on the mountain, this symbolic importance made Turkish authorities. Temporary windows for research sometimes got opened by international pressure. Opportunities for scientific expeditions might get created by UNESCO's interest in the region or diplomatic negotiations. However, long these openings rarely lasted. Access again would get closed as political tensions resurfaced. More attention than open access might have generated got attracted by the mountain's forbidden slopes. Publicity that drew international interest got created by restrictions. A news story became every denied expedition. More famous than scientific accessibility might have achieved, the mountain's political inaccessibility made it. James Bryce and the timber on the mountain. Distinguished British politician and historian James Bryce finds himself in the summer of 1876 staring upward at Mount Ararat's snow-covered peaks. Unlike previous climbers who got driven by religious fervor, with scholarly skepticism, the mountain gets approached by Bryce. Scientific observation, not biblical confirmation, is his goal. All the more significant, this difference in motivation will make his discovery. To his expedition, impressive credentials get brought by Bryce. As a member of Parliament, he serves, and at Oxford University, a professorship in civil law gets held. International acclaim has been earned by his books on the Roman Empire and American democracy. Notice gets taken by the scholarly world when such a respected academic decides to climb Ararat. Through official channels, proper permits get secured by the British diplomat. Doors that remain closed to independent explorers get opened by his government position. Access gets granted partly because political protection gets provided by Britain's friendship with the Sultan by Ottoman authorities. From diplomatic immunity that most climbers lack, Bryce's expedition benefits. With cautious optimism, local Armenian guides welcome Bryce. The mountain's dangers get known by them, and working with someone who respects their knowledge gets appreciated. Unlike treasure hunters or religious fanatics, to their warnings about weather, terrain, and safe routes, Bryce listens. To the expedition's success, this collaboration proves crucial. From the village of Agri on the mountain's northeastern slopes, the climb begins. Armenian guides, pack animals, and scientific equipment get included in Bryce's party. At increasing elevations, base camps get established, allowing time for acclimatization. Academic training and practical wisdom of Bryce get reflected by the methodical approach. From the start, the expedition gets challenged by weather conditions. As dangerous as winter blizzards, summer storms on Ararat can be. Unprepared, climbers get caught by sudden temperature drops. Hail, lightning, and winds that threaten to blow them off exposed ridges get faced by Bryce's party. Only disaster gets prevented by careful preparation and experienced guides. Most equipment behind gets left when leaving gets required for the final push to the summit. Only essential supplies get carried by Bryce and his strongest guides. Through the night to avoid afternoon storms, they climb. An effort becomes every step because of the thin air at high altitude. Forward despite physical exhaustion, Bryce's determination drives him. At 14,000 feet near the summit plateau, his historic discovery gets made by Bryce. From the ice protruding, a piece of ancient wood gets found by him. About 4 feet in length, the timber measures and signs of having been worked by human hands get shown. On its surface, Tool marks are visible. Gopher wood, the species mentioned in Genesis, the wood appears to be. His response to the discovery gets shaped by Bryce's training as a scholar. The find's location gets carefully documented, the wood's dimensions get measured, and its apparent age gets noted. Far above the tree line where no natural forest could grow, the timber lies. Through human agency, explanation gets demanded by its presence. Great antiquity gets suggested by the wood's condition. Its surface has been darkened by centuries of freezing and thawing. Remarkably well, it has been preserved by the high altitude and dry conditions. Thousands of years old it could be, Bryce estimates, though in 1876, precise dating methods don't exist. For future analysis, samples of the wood get collected by Bryce. Carefully, the pieces get wrapped, and their exact location on the mountain gets documented. By experts in London, examination will get undergone by these samples. From previous claims based on visual sightings alone, Bryce's discovery gets distinguished by the scientific approach. As challenging as the ascent, the descent from Ararat proves. On the exposed upper slopes, dangerous conditions get created by afternoon storms. To avoid slipping on ice-covered rocks, carefully Bryce's party moves. To their packs, weight gets added by the precious wood samples, but throughout the descent, careful protection gets received by them. Rapidly through telegraph networks, news of Bryce's discovery spreads. With varying degrees of skepticism and excitement, the find gets reported by European newspapers. As proof of biblical accuracy, it gets hailed by religious publications. More detailed analysis before drawing conclusions gets awaited by scientific journals. Credibility to the discovery that previous claims lacked gets lent by Bryce's reputation. Difficult to dismiss the find as fantasy or fraud. His political position and academic standing make it. That Bryce wouldn't risk his reputation on a hoax even gets acknowledged by skeptics. From the scholarly community, serious consideration gets demanded by the discovery. Intriguing results get yielded by laboratory analysis of the wood samples, consistent with biblical accounts. Gopher wood, the timber, appears to be. Precisely its age cannot be determined, but any known human activity in the region clearly gets predated by it. Deliberate shaping for construction purposes gets suggested by the tool marks. Beyond biblical archaeology, the discovery's implications extend. Physical evidence for the flood narrative gets provided if the wood represents part of Noah's Ark. At a time when traditional religious beliefs get challenged by scientific discoveries, biblical literalism would get supported by this. Higher couldn't be the stakes for both religious and secular communities. About the discovery's significance, cautiously optimistic Bryce himself remains. Definitive proof of the Ark's existence claiming gets avoided, while the wood's mysterious presence gets acknowledged. Rather than diminishes the discovery's credibility, this scholarly restraint enhances it. New interest in Ararat exploration gets ignited by the find. That systematic scientific investigation can yield results gets proven by Bryce's success. For future expeditions, a model his methods become. That ancient wooden artifacts can survive in the mountain's harsh environment also gets established by the discovery. Whether the wood really comes from Noah's Ark gets questioned by critics. Alternative explanations get suggested by them: ancient settlements, medieval pilgrimage sites, or more recent construction projects. However, difficult to support, the wood's location far above any known human habitation makes these theories. A turning point in Ararat exploration gets marked by Bryce's discovery. On faith and hope, previous expeditions relied. That scientific methods can produce tangible results gets demonstrated by Bryce. A new generation of explorers who combine religious conviction with scholarly rigor gets inspired by his success. Famous artifacts in their own right, the wood samples become. As possible relics of Noah's Ark, museums display them. From a respected academic into a biblical archaeology pioneer, Bryce gets transformed by the discovery. With the search for Noah's Ark, his name becomes permanently associated. Far beyond 1876, the discovery's long-term impact extends. For future expeditions, encouragement gets provided by Bryce's success. Hope that larger portions of the Ark might survive gets offered by the wood samples. Stronger with each passing year, the mountain's reputation as a repository of biblical artifacts grows. The surge of the 20th century. Like spring flowers after rain, with expeditions to Mount Ararat multiplying, the new century dawns. Improved transportation, better equipment, and growing public fascination with biblical archaeology get brought by the 1900s. From isolated scholarly ventures into a popular movement that captures imaginations across continents, what began transforms. Faster and more comfortable than ever before, the journey to Turkey gets made by steamship travel. Closer to Ararat, railroad lines extend, reducing the overland portion of the trip. With supporters back home, coordination gets allowed by telegraph communications for expedition leaders. Access to the mountain previously limited, these technological advances lower barriers that had. After 1900, American interest in the Ark search explodes. As part of their missionary work, expeditions get funded by Protestant denominations. Attempts on Ararat get included in student trips to the Holy Land organized by Bible colleges. For American Christians seeking to strengthen their faith through physical evidence, a pilgrimage destination the mountain becomes. New possibilities for Ararat exploration get opened by the Wright brothers' successful flight in 1903, a flying over the mountain to spot the Ark from above, aviation pioneers' dream. To clear Ararat's peaks, early aircraft lack the altitude capability, but public imagination gets captured by the potential for aerial reconnaissance. Unexpected opportunities for Ark research get brought by World War I. Strange formations on Ararat's upper slopes get reported by military pilots flying missions over the region. A large wooden structure near the summit gets claimed to be seen by Russian aviator Vladimir Roskovitsky in 1917. Believers and skeptics alike get electrified by his account. Immediate investigation of Roskovitsky's sighting gets prevented by the war's chaos. As the Bolshevik Revolution consumes the empire, Russian forces collapse. Territory lost to Russian advances gets reclaimed by Turkish armies. Rather than a research site, a battleground the mountain becomes. Unverified but unforgotten, Roskovitsky's story remains. Fresh challenges for foreign expeditions get created by post-war Turkey's new government under Mustafa Kemal. To modernize and westernize the secular republic once, but of foreign motives, suspicion remains. Particular scrutiny from officials promoting Turkish nationalism gets faced by Christian expeditions seeking Noah's Ark. By wealthy industrialists and religious organizations, a wave of American expeditions gets funded and brought by the 1920s. The latest camping gear, photographic equipment, and scientific instruments get carried by these well-equipped ventures. With the outside world, real-time contact gets allowed by radio communications. More than scholarly research, military operations the expeditions resemble. Several expeditions get led by Oriental Institute archaeologist James Henry Breasted in the 1920s. Credibility that previous searches lacked gets provided by his scholarly reputation and University of Chicago affiliation. New standards for scientific investigation get established by Breasted's systematic approach to the mountain. Ararat expeditions into entertainment spectacles get transformed by the introduction of motion picture cameras to document their adventures. Climbing parties get accompanied by filmmakers. Into theaters across America, the mountain's majesty and danger get brought by these movies. More compelling than ever, the visual medium makes the search for Noah's Ark. New forms of public engagement get created by radio broadcasts from Ararat expeditions. As it unfolds, the action can be followed by listeners at home. More accessible while emphasizing its exotic dangers, these broadcasts make the mountains seem. The gap between ancient biblical stories and modern scientific investigation gets bridged by the technology. The number of private expeditions to Ararat temporarily gets reduced by the Great Depression. To postpone their plans, economic hardship forces many would-be explorers. However, some of the most determined and resourceful Ark hunters also get produced by the period. Through creativity and persistence, financial obstacles get overcome by these individuals. New complications for Ararat access get created by Soviet control of eastern Armenia. directly on the border between Turkey and the USSR. The mountain now sits. A potential international incident, any expedition gets made by Cold War tensions. Particular scrutiny from both Turkish and Soviet authorities gets faced by American climbers. The emergence of more sophisticated hoaxes and fraudulent claims gets seen in the 1930s. As public interest in the Ark grows, so does the temptation to manufacture evidence. Legitimate research gets complicated by fake photographs, planted artifacts, and fabricated witness accounts. Increasingly difficult, separating truth from fiction becomes the challenge. Aerial reconnaissance of Ararat possible finally gets made by aviation advances. High enough to photograph the entire mountain from above, pilots can now fly. For signs of the Ark, thousands of images that researchers analyze get produced by these flights. The search methodology gets revolutionized by the systematic aerial survey approach. Ararat, more accessible to amateur expeditions, gets made by the development of better climbing equipment. The technical barriers to reaching the summit get reduced by improved boots, ropes, and cold weather gear. The climb can now be attempted by more people, though as deadly as ever, the mountain's dangers remain. New context for the flood story gets provided by archaeological discoveries in Mesopotamia. Ancient flood deposits that may correlate with biblical accounts get revealed by excavations at Babylon and other sites. To the idea that the flood story has historical basis, scientific support gets lent by these findings. A large audience, eager for physical proof of biblical truth, gets created by the rise of fundamentalist Christianity in America. The tension between scientific and religious worldviews gets highlighted by the Scopes trial of 1925, a way to demonstrate that science and scripture can coexist. Finding Noah's Ark becomes. Covering Ararat expeditions, National Geographic magazine begins in the 1930s. To mainstream American audiences, the mountain gets brought by the publication's high-quality photography and scientific credibility. Some of the magazine's most popular features become articles about the search for Noah's Ark. A new urgency to Ararat research gets brought by the approach of World War II. To complete their work before too dangerous, the region becomes because of international tensions. Many expeditions rush. A potential flashpoint in the coming conflict, the mountain's strategic location near the Soviet border makes it one of the world's most famous mountains. Mount Ararat has become by 1940. International attention gets attracted and countless books, articles, and films get generated by the search for Noah's Ark. Firmly established, seems the mountain's reputation as a keeper of biblical secrets. For even more dramatic discoveries in the decades ahead, the stage is set. The Ararat anomaly. A turning point in the search for Noah's Ark gets marked by the year 1949. High above the earth, Mount Ararat gets photographed by a U-2 spy plane as part of routine intelligence gathering. In biblical archaeology, no interest gets held by the pilot. On Soviet military installations near the Turkish border, his mission focuses with mechanical precision. Everything below gets recorded by the camera. Something unusual on Ararat's northwest slope gets noticed by intelligence analysts studying the photographs. At 15,500 feet elevation from the ice and snow, a dark shape emerges. Artificial, the object appears too regular to be natural rock formation. Something enormous, possibly several hundred feet long, its dimensions suggest. Immediately, the photographs get classified by the Central Intelligence Agency. Public discussion of reconnaissance missions over sensitive border regions gets prevented by Cold War secrecy. In government vaults, the images remain locked while their significance gets debated by analysts. Aircraft wreckage. The object could be, some suggest, something far older it might be, others wonder. Slowly, through intelligence networks, word of the mysterious photographs leaks. In private conversations, the discovery gets mentioned by former military personnel. Rumors of government cover-ups begin getting reported by religious publications. Elements of conspiracy theory that complicate serious investigation get taken on by the story. Ixion. More photographs of the anomalous object get yielded by additional reconnaissance flights over Ararat. New details get revealed by different angles and lighting conditions. Partially buried in glacial ice, the shape appears. At certain points, wooden beams seem visible. Roughly, with traditional accounts of the ark's resting place, the object's location corresponds. Whether to investigate the object further gets debated by military officials. Cooperation from Turkish authorities and diplomatic complications would get required by ground expeditions. Access difficult. The object's location in a militarily sensitive area makes scientific curiosity gets outweighed by political considerations in government decision-making. Public knowledge. The photograph's existence becomes in the 1970s through Freedom of Information Act requests. References to the Ararat anomaly get discovered by researchers studying government UFO files. Classified. The images themselves remain, but decades of speculation about secret government knowledge gets confirmed by their existence. Conflicting interpretations get produced by analysis of the available photographs. Natural geological features that could create the observed shadows and shapes get identified by some experts. Artificial origin gets suggested by the object's regularity, others argue. Without access to the original high-resolution images, the debate continues. New opportunities to study the Ararat anomaly get provided by satellite technology in the 1960s. Images of the mountain that become publicly available get captured by NASA's Landsat program. The resolution of classified spy satellite images these photographs lack, but clues about the mysterious object's nature and location get offered. Challenges for ground investigation get created by the anomaly's position on Ararat. In an avalanche zone prone to sudden snowslides, the northwest slope, where it appears, sits. Throughout most of the year, harsh weather conditions at 15,500 feet elevation remain, well above normal climbing routes used by expedition teams. The object lies. Additional details about the anomaly get revealed by computer enhancement of available photographs. Contrasts can be highlighted, and shapes that appear ambiguous in original images get clarified by digital processing. The presence of linear features that could represent constructed beams or planking gets suggested by these techniques. Biblical descriptions of Noah's Ark remarkably well get matched by the object's apparent size. As 300 cubits, roughly 450 feet using ancient measurements, the ark's length gets specified by Genesis. Approximately 500 feet in length, the Ararat anomaly appears to measure. Believers get excited by this correspondence, while the imprecision of photographic measurements gets noted by skeptics. Context for the anomaly's location gets provided by geological studies of Ararat's northwest slope. Evidence of past avalanches and rockfalls that could bury large objects gets shown by the area. How something could become partially buried yet remain visible, glacial movements over centuries might explain. For millennia, organic materials could get preserved by the harsh environment. With advances in aerial photography and remote sensing technology, the anomaly's discovery coincides. Details invisible to earlier reconnaissance equipment can now be captured by high-resolution cameras. Temperature differences that might indicate hollow spaces within buried objects get revealed by infrared imaging. New ways to study the mysterious formation get offered by these tools. Scientific access to the anomaly site gets limited by international tensions around the Cold War period. Strategically sensitive, the mountain's location near the Soviet border makes it. Restrictions get faced by American researchers when trying to organize expeditions. In investigating what they consider a Western religious obsession, little interest gets shown by Soviet scientists. Frustration among researchers seeking to study the anomaly gets created by the classification of reconnaissance photographs. Conspiracy theories about official cover-ups of biblical evidence get fed by government secrecy. That secular authorities want to suppress proof of religious truth gets argued by some believers. Rational discussion of the evidence gets complicated by these tensions. New opportunities to study the Ararat anomaly get offered by commercial satellite imagery, becoming available in the 1980s. Photographs with resolution approaching military reconnaissance standards can now be provided by private companies. Dependence on classified government sources gets reduced by this democratization of satellite technology. Through popular culture during the 1970s and 1980s, the anomaly's fame spreads. As possible evidence of Noah's Ark, the mysterious object gets featured by television documentaries. Chapters on the Ararat anomaly get included by books about ancient mysteries. In ways that government secrecy only enhances, public imagination gets captured by the story. Enormous logistical challenges get faced by scientific expeditions to investigate the anomaly. Specialized mountaineering skills and equipment get required by the object's high-altitude location. Difficult to obtain, Turkish permits for climbing in the sensitive border zone remain. Safe access windows present themselves only during limited time frames throughout each year. The anomaly's visible characteristics transform as glacial conditions undergo shifts. Certain photographs reveal greater portions of the object visible above the surface, while alternative images show it almost entirely concealed beneath newly fallen snow. These fluctuations indicate that the enigmatic formation remains vulnerable to natural elements that might ultimately obliterate it or bury it from view entirely. Contemporary GPS technology permits exact positioning of the anomaly through coordinates extracted from satellite imagery. This technological advancement enables expedition groups to chart a course straight to the location instead of surveying extensive mountain regions. The innovation converts a general area into a precise destination for scientific inquiry. The Ararat anomaly stands as one of biblical archaeology's most captivating enigmas. Its revelation through military surveillance introduces dimensions of clandestine operations and governmental concealment to the ancient narrative of Noah's vessel. Whether this object constitutes the scriptural craft, remains of downed aircraft, or naturally occurring geological structure, remains a subject of ongoing discussion and research. Turkey's governmental upheaval during the 1960s ushers in dramatic shifts to the nation's approach regarding Mount Ararat. Military takeovers restructure governmental focus and objectives. As Kurdish instability jeopardizes regional security, international expeditions pursuing Noah's vessel become ensnared in political friction that converts the mountain from an archaeological destination into a controlled military territory. Turkey's strategic alliance with NATO further complicates researcher access to Ararat for investigators from partner countries. The peak's nearness to the Soviet frontier transforms every expedition into a possible intelligence operation. Turkish administrators find themselves unable to differentiate between scholars of biblical archaeology and reconnaissance personnel masquerading as religious investigators. Creating a restricted military perimeter surrounding Ararat generates fresh administrative hurdles. Climbing authorizations now demand clearance from numerous governmental departments. Military leadership must examine expedition proposals together with tourism representatives. The procedure becomes increasingly complicated with successive years as security anxieties intensify. Kurdish separatist operations throughout southeastern Turkey justify heightened military deployment around Ararat. The PKK's militant struggle against Turkish security forces renders the complete area hazardous for civilian populations. Government representatives reference security worries when refusing authorizations to international expeditions, employing insurgency as justification for wider access limitations. Economic infrastructure initiatives near Ararat introduce further complications for investigators. Dam projects and extraction activities introduce industrial operations to formerly isolated territories. These undertakings necessitate security measures that expand into adjacent regions. The mountain becomes surrounded by controlled areas bearing no relationship to archaeological concerns. Turkish officials implement comprehensive credential verification for expedition coordinators requesting authorizations. Intelligence agencies scrutinize applicants' associations with foreign administrations, religious institutions, and journalism organizations. The vetting procedure can extend across years and frequently concludes with unexplained rejections that frustrate and concern researchers. The expansion of Turkish nationalism influences perspectives toward foreign assertions regarding Ararat. Numerous Turkish citizens resent the suggestion that their mountain functions predominantly as a storage site for other civilizations' sacred objects. This attitude shapes policy determinations about research authorizations and establishes additional obstacles for international expeditions. Military intelligence surveillance of expedition transmissions establish conditions of perpetual observation. Radio communications attract official scrutiny that complicates standard coordination efforts. Investigators must presume that officials monitor their complete range of activities, producing self-imposed restrictions that impair thorough investigation. The Armenian diaspora's political endeavors complicate Turkish relationships with Christian groups seeking to investigate Ararat. Official anxiety about Armenian territorial assertions extends to religious communities that might endorse those positions. Expeditions including Armenian members encounter heightened examination from security agencies. Frontier confrontations between Turkey and Soviet military personnel escalate tensions surrounding Ararat throughout the 1970s. Each incident produces enhanced security protocols that impact civilian mountain access. The political atmosphere becomes increasingly constraining as international hostilities intensify. Environmental conservation emerges as fresh rationale for constraining Ararat access. Turkish representatives cite harm inflicted by earlier expeditions when declining new authorizations. This explanation offers politically palatable justification for security constraints, while appearing to advance conservation objectives. Iran's 1979 revolution destabilizes the complete region and supplies additional grounds for limiting Ararat access. Refugee movements across the Turkish frontier generate humanitarian crises that burden governmental capabilities. Military personnel deploy to oversee border protection, rendering the mountain territory increasingly sensitive. Narcotics trafficking through southeastern Turkey introduces another security aspect to Ararat restrictions. The mountain's isolated position makes it appealing to smuggling networks transporting drugs from Afghanistan through Turkey toward European destinations. Government personnel conducting counter-narcotic campaigns regard any atypical activity with mistrust. Tourism development initiatives around Ararat generate conflicts between commercial and security priorities. Regional administrators desire to market the mountain as a climbing venue, while military leadership insists upon preserving stringent access regulations. These conflicting objectives produce inconsistent approaches that bewilder prospective visitors. The emergence of Islamic fundamentalism throughout the region shapes governmental perspectives toward Christian expeditions. Representatives worry that foreign religious operations might trigger sectarian hostilities in ethnically varied southeastern Turkey. Expeditions pursuing Noah's vessel exemplify precisely the type of endeavor that could aggravate religious tensions. International press coverage of Ararat expeditions generates political pressure that Turkish officials prefer avoiding. Publicity concerning governmental limitations produces condemnation from religious liberty supporters and biblical archaeology advocates. Representatives determine that refusing authorizations proves simpler than publicly defending their determinations. Implementing emergency governance in southeastern Turkey during the 1980s establishes legal foundations for comprehensive access limitations. Military administrators can refuse authorizations without justification and constrain movement across the region. These extraordinary authorities persist well beyond the immediate crisis that triggered their activation. Technological developments in monitoring enable Turkish officials to observe Ararat more comprehensively than previously possible. Radar systems track aircraft nearing the mountain, while electronic detectors identify unauthorized surface activity. This thorough monitoring infrastructure renders clandestine expeditions virtually unfeasible. The Cold War's conclusion in 1989 might reasonably have diminished restrictions surrounding Ararat. Nevertheless, the Soviet Union's dissolution generates fresh instabilities that Turkish representatives cite when preserving tight security. The mountain remains equally restricted, despite the original threat's disappearance. European Union accession discussions require Turkey to exhibit respect for religious liberty and scholarly investigation. However, security exemptions permit continued limitations on endeavors considered potentially dangerous. Ararat expeditions occupy uncertain territory where security considerations override religious freedom. The Kurdistan Workers' Party confrontation intensifies across the 1990s, furnishing continuous justification for maintaining military constraints around Ararat. Counterinsurgency campaigns establish prohibited zones that relocate without advance notice. Expedition groups might discover their authorized pathways suddenly inaccessible because of military operations. Contemporary communication technology permits Turkish officials to observe expedition activities more thoroughly than ever before. Satellite communication devices, GPS instruments, and internet transmissions supply immediate intelligence regarding foreign operations on the mountain. This comprehensive monitoring establishes conditions where confidentiality becomes unattainable. The September 11, 2001 attacks in America furnish fresh justification for limiting foreign activities near sensitive frontier territories. Counterterrorism anxieties affect all international movement, but mountaineering expeditions in isolated border regions encounter particular examination. The security climate becomes more constraining despite absent direct threats. Turkish authority over Ararat access remains complete as the 21st century advances. Political circumstances that originally prompted restrictions have transformed, but the administrative apparatus of regulation endures. The mountain's prohibited character becomes self-sustaining, as representatives prefer maintaining limitations to accepting the uncertain ramifications of permitting access. The legendary George Hagopian emerges. During summer 1902, a 10-year-old Armenian child named George Hagopian ascends Mount Ararat accompanied by his uncle. They climb beyond the frozen boundary, past the elevation where most expeditions reverse course. Approaching the peak, the child observes something that will remain with him throughout his existence: a substantial wooden construction emerging from glacial ice. Young George draws near the ancient timber with childhood's fearless inquisitiveness. His uncle cautions him toward carefulness, but the child clambers onto the wooden supports. He traverses what seems to be the platform of an immense craft. The timber feels sturdy under his weight despite its evident age. Tool impressions remain visible where ancient builders fashioned the massive beams. The construction extends far across the distance, considerably longer than any building the child has previously encountered. Portions vanish beneath the ice, while other sections stand revealed to the mountain atmosphere. George observes that the timber possesses an unusual greenish tint unlike any wood he recognizes from the lowland valleys. The preservation appears extraordinary given the severe environmental conditions. George's uncle clarifies that they have located Noah's vessel, the craft referenced in ancient writings. The man displays proper reverence for the finding, while guaranteeing his nephew comprehends its importance. They dedicate several hours investigating the reachable portions before weather circumstances compel them to commence their return. The child's relatives receive his narrative with divergent reactions. Certain family members accept his account entirely, interpreting it as divine favor upon their devout household. Others propose that elevation and excitement produced hallucinations. The split response within his immediate family anticipates the doubt George will confront throughout his existence. Years elapse before George relates his account to anyone beyond his closest relatives. The Armenian atrocities of 1915 disperse his family throughout the world. George ultimately emigrates to America, preserving his childhood recollection of the vessel like a valuable yet delicate possession. The narrative becomes integral to his identity as an Armenian displaced person. George's description remains unchanging through decades of repetition. He recounts identical particulars about the wood's characteristics, the construction's proportions, and the emotional significance of the finding. This steadfastness impresses audiences who anticipate invented accounts to alter over time. His constant testimony provides the narrative credibility. The elderly gentleman begins publicly sharing his account during the 1960s, when fascination with Noah's vessel reaches unprecedented levels. Publications print his narrative alongside artistic interpretations based on his recollections. Television creators interview him for documentaries about pursuing biblical objects. George achieves minor fame within particular religious communities. Investigators examining George's narrative observe several particulars that appear to validate its genuineness. His characterization of the wood's greenish coloration corresponds with descriptions from alternative expeditions. The position he indicates aligns with satellite photographs of unusual objects on Ararat. His childhood viewpoint furnishes details that mature observers might have overlooked. Detractors question how a 10-year-old child could precisely evaluate the antiquity and importance of wooden constructions on a mountain. They contend that childhood recollections prove unreliable and susceptible to adult influences. Some propose that George may have observed natural rock structures that his creativity converted into artificial formations. George's Armenian background adds cultural dimension to his account that connects with numerous believers. Armenians have preserved strong traditions regarding the vessel's location on their ancestral mountain. His narrative corresponds with this cultural foundation, while supplying specific personal particulars that general folklore doesn't possess. The chronology of George's public revelation coincides with revived fascination in Ararat investigation during the 1960s and 1970s. His account supplies motivation for expeditions pursuing physical proof of the vessel. Publishers and documentary producers discover his personal chronicle more engaging than academic discussions about archaeological prospects. George's considerable age when he commences publicly telling his account raises concerns about memory dependability. Decades have transpired since his childhood encounter on Ararat. Doubters observe that elderly recollections frequently combine reality with imagination in ways the narrator doesn't acknowledge. Nevertheless, advocates reference the account's unchanging particulars as proof of authentic experience. The absence of physical documentation from George's 1902 encounter disappoints both believers and doubters. The child brought no images or specimens from the location. His uncle, who could have confirmed the account, perished during the Armenian atrocities. George remained solitary as witness to one of history's most remarkable archaeological findings. Contemporary expeditions endeavor to authenticate George's narrative by pinpointing the location he referenced. GPS coordinates extracted from his account direct search groups to particular mountain areas. However, glacial displacement over a century could have concealed or eliminated the constructions he asserted seeing. The physical documentation remains unattainable. George's narrative shapes popular culture depictions of Noah's vessel throughout the late 20th century. Cinema and television incorporate particulars from his description when portraying the vessel's characteristics and position. His chronicle helps establish public anticipations about what investigators might locate on Ararat. The psychological significance of George's account transcends its factual accuracy or inaccuracy. His narrative furnishes optimism for believers that physical documentation of scriptural occurrences can still be uncovered. The account converts abstract faith into tangible prospect. This motivational capacity clarifies much of the chronicle's lasting attraction. George's thorough characterizations of the vessel's assembly supply material for theological conversations about the craft's architecture. His description of traversing the platform provides believers a concrete association to the scriptural chronicle. The account connects ancient text and contemporary experience in ways that resonate with religious communities. Academic investigators approached George's account with scholarly doubt while recognizing its cultural importance. The narrative exemplifies how individual testimony influences religious conviction. Whether factually accurate or imaginatively developed, the chronicle exposes profound human requirements for physical association to spiritual realities. George Hagopian passes away in 1972, carrying his knowledge to the grave. His account persists through preserved interviews and published descriptions. Contemporary technology might have documented his assertions more comprehensively, but the enigma surrounding his chronicle enhances its influence. The child who traversed Noah's vessel becomes legendary in his own standing. The inheritance of George's account continues shaping Ararat expeditions decades following his passing. Search groups still employ his characterizations when organizing their pathways and recognizing promising positions. His narrative furnishes a human dimension for the abstract pursuit to locate Noah's vessel. The child's amazement at his finding captures the sense of wonder that motivates contemporary seekers to endanger their existence on the mountain inclines. The emergence of evangelical expeditions begins. The year 1970 introduced a fresh category of seeker to Mount Ararat. These weren't the solitary adventurers or governmental operatives of previous decades. Instead, structured groups of believers materialized with financing, apparatus, and absolute conviction that divine guidance would direct them to their objective. Fernan Navarra had ignited something substantial. His 1,955 finding of ancient timber on Ararat's inclines transmitted waves through Christian populations throughout America. Religious congregations combined resources. Believers placed mortgages on residences. The devout perceived this as their opportunity to demonstrate what they had consistently understood in their souls. The Search Foundation established itself in 1973, directed by investigator John Morris. Morris integrated scientific qualifications and evangelical fervor together. He assembled geologists, archaeologists, and mountaineers who embraced his perspective. Their expeditions weren't informal weekend excursions. These constituted military-style campaigns with radio apparatus, climbing equipment, and comprehensive charts. Summer following summer, groups ascended Ararat's dangerous inclines. They transported metal identification devices, photographic equipment, and specimen containers. Each expedition required thousands of dollars. Contributors provided generously, convinced their financial support would fund the century's revelation. The expeditions encountered immediate obstacles. Turkish officials observed their complete activity. Authorizations required months to obtain. Regional guides requested substantial compensation and frequently withdrew at the final opportunity. The mountain itself appeared to oppose their attempts with abrupt tempests and hazardous rock slides. Nevertheless, the believers advanced onward. They discovered timber pieces at diverse elevations. Some appeared ancient, weathered by centuries of frozen conditions and atmospheric forces. Others appeared suspiciously recent. The groups meticulously recorded each finding, photographing the timber against measurement instruments and recording precise positions. Throughout America, the documentation generated enthusiasm. Religious congregations arranged presentations where expedition participants displayed images of their discoveries. End quote. Publications emerged with designations like The Ark on Ararat and Quest for Noah's Ark. Television broadcasts presented interviews with the investigators. The movement captured passionate advocates. Entrepreneur George Jamal asserted having climbed Ararat clandestinely and recovered vessel timber. He presented himself on discussion programs holding a piece of dark wood he designated sacred timber. Subsequent investigations exposed Jamal had never traveled to Turkey. His timber originated from a railroad component soaked in teriyaki liquid to artificially age it. Authentic expeditions persisted despite such deceptions. The group, directed by astronaut James Irwin, exemplified the movement's pinnacle. Irwin had traversed the lunar surface with Apollo 15. His prominence opened pathways and captured media interest. Turkish representatives granted authorizations they refused to others. Irwin's 1,982 expedition introduced advanced apparatus up Ararat's inclines. They employed ground-penetrating radar to examine beneath the frozen surface. Photographic equipment documented every phase of their voyage. The group discovered wooden supports concealed in glacial ice approaching the summit. The revelation transmitted shock throughout the Christian community. Here existed physical documentation from the precise location the scriptures indicated Noah's vessel had settled. The supports appeared manually hewn, connected with primitive methods. Carbon analysis indicated they were millennia old. Scientists maintained doubt. They emphasized that numerous ancient constructions had been erected throughout the territory. Timber could have reached the mountain through diverse methods. The wood's antiquity didn't necessarily demonstrate its association to any scriptural vessel. The evangelical expeditions exposed a deeper reality about conviction and documentation. Believers approached the mountain with certainty about their anticipated discoveries. They interpreted every finding through the perspective of their beliefs. Timber became vessel supports. Rock structures became platform reinforcements. Natural frozen caverns became storage chambers. Turkish officials grew exhausted of the perpetual expeditions. Each group necessitated authorizations, guides, and security supervision. The mountain became a pilgrimage destination for Christians from throughout the world. Regional populations profited from the visitors, but also managed the disruption. The expeditions also captured fraudsters and opportunists. Some asserted possessing satellite images displaying the vessel's silhouette. Others marketed pieces of vessel timber to collectors. The boundary between sincere conviction and intentional fraud became indistinct as the movement expanded. By the 1990s, the Evangelical expeditions had created a fresh tradition. Each summer introduced new groups to Ararat's inclines. They transported superior apparatus, increased financing, and unshakable resolve. The mountain had transformed into a proving territory for conviction, a location where belief could transform into reality through diligent investigation. The timber specimens occupied laboratories throughout America. Scientists examined grain configurations, cellular compositions, and chemical makeup. Some outcomes indicated substantial antiquity, others suggested more contemporary origins. The documentation remained as elusive as the vessel itself. Religious congregations divided over the discoveries. Some embraced the discoveries as verification of scriptural reality. Others cautioned against positioning conviction in physical objects instead of spiritual realities. The pursuit had become equally about human character as ancient chronicles. The Evangelical expeditions converted Ararat from a geographical characteristic into a representation. The mountain symbolized the convergence of conviction and documentation, belief and verification. Each expedition climbed not merely toward the peak, but toward confirmation of their most profound beliefs. Crashed helicopters and missing climbers follow. Mount Ararat had previously claimed its initial casualties when the contemporary pursuit commenced. The mountain standing for danger was thoroughly established among regional climbers and guides. Nevertheless, the prospect of finding Noah's vessel attracted searchers who miscalculated the peak's lethal character. The landscape itself presented constant hazards. Ararat ascends approximately 17,000 feet above ocean level, sufficiently elevated to produce altitude illness in inadequately prepared climbers. The peak remains permanently blanketed in frozen precipitation and snow. Meteorological configurations transform without advance warning, confining climbers in snowstorms that can persist for extended periods. Crevasses conceal themselves beneath innocent-appearing snow coverings. Searchers have stepped through these delicate surfaces and descended into dark, frozen caverns below. The mountain's volcanic character generates unstable rock structures that disintegrate under climbers' mass. Loose minerals cascade down the inclines, impacting anyone unfortunate enough to occupy their trajectory. The initial documented fatality transpired in 1954, when a French climber descended into a crevasse approaching the summit. His remains were never retrieved. The occurrence should have functioned as a caution, but the vessel pursuits continued attracting risk acceptors and adventure seekers. Aircraft introduced fresh dangers as expeditions commenced employing helicopters to access elevated elevations. The reduced atmosphere at elevation diminished engine capability. Abrupt wind transformations could thrust aircraft into the mountainside. Touchdown areas were limited and frequently dangerous. In 1969, a helicopter transporting American investigators crashed on Ararat's lower inclines. The aviation operator survived with serious wounds, but one occupant perished in the destruction. Turkish rescue groups required 3 days to access the crash location. The survivors withstood freezing temperatures and powerful winds while awaiting assistance. The occurrence exposed the mountain's remoteness. Emergency assistance remained hours distant, even during favorable weather. Medical transportation necessitated specialized apparatus and experienced mountain rescue groups. Most expeditions climbed without adequate contingency arrangements or emergency transmission systems. Weather-associated disappearances became disturbingly frequent. Climbers would embark for day excursions and never return. Search groups would discover their apparatus dispersed across the mountainside, dispersed by hurricane-intensity winds. Remains sometimes surfaced from glaciers years subsequently, preserved by the frozen conditions, but providing no indications about their final moments. The 1970s introduced more advanced expeditions and deadlier incidents. Groups employed motorized apparatus to transport substantial loads up the mountain. Snow vehicles penetrated through frozen surfaces and descended into concealed pools. Power generators occupied enclosed areas with carbon monoxide, producing expedition participants to lose awareness. One especially tragic occurrence involved a group of Turkish climbers in 1973. They created a foundation encampment at 12,000 feet and intended to dedicate a week pursuing vessel remains. An abrupt tempest concealed their encampment location beneath 6 feet of snow. Rescue groups discovered the encampment 3 days subsequently, but all 5 climbers had perished from suffocation in their disintegrated shelters. The international expeditions of the 1980s introduced fresh categories of incidents. Groups transported advanced electronics up the mountain, including metal identification apparatus and ground-penetrating radar. Lightning impacts eliminated apparatus and wounded operators. One investigator experienced severe burns when his metal identification instrument attracted a lightning discharge during a summit tempest. Missing individual situations multiplied as additional searchers endeavored solitary ascents. Some believed they could discover the vessel by pursuing divine motivation instead of established climbing pathways. These persons frequently embarked without informing guides or officials about their intentions. Their disappearances weren't identified until days or weeks subsequently. The mountain's political circumstances added human dangers to natural ones. Turkish military patrols occasionally confused expedition participants for smugglers or insurgents. Several climbers were restrained at firearm point and confined for interrogation. Others were commanded to depart the mountain immediately, compelling them to descend dangerous pathways in darkness. Apparatus malfunctions demonstrated particularly lethal in Ararat's severe conditions. Climbing cables deteriorated in the cold and fractured under burden. Shelters disintegrated in powerful winds, abandoning occupants revealed to fatal temperatures. Water purification systems malfunctioned, compelling climbers to consume contaminated snow dissolution that produced severe illness. The psychological burden of unsuccessful expeditions also contributed to incidents. Searchers who committed years and thousands of dollars in discovering the vessel occasionally accepted desperate hazards when their authorizations were approaching termination. They advanced into dangerous territories during adverse weather, anticipating final opportunity discoveries. By the 1990s, the casualty total had achieved alarming proportions. At minimum, 30 individuals had perished on Ararat during vessel-associated expeditions. Hundreds additional had experienced serious wounds, including frostbite, fractured bones, and elevation illness. The mountain's standing transformed from promising to dangerous. Turkish officials commenced requiring all expeditions to transport emergency transmitters and satellite communication devices. Guides obtained superior instruction in mountain rescue methods. Medical transportation procedures enhanced, though the mountain's isolation still indicated assistance could remain hours distant. The incidents never terminated the pursuits entirely. Each tragedy appeared to motivate fresh expeditions, as if the mountain's opposition demonstrated something valuable remained concealed on its inclines. The danger became integral to the vessel pursuit mythology, documentation that substantial forces protected the ancient craft. Regional populations commenced perceiving the foreign searchers with a combination of compassion and disappointment. They benefited from guiding assistance and apparatus rentals, but also sustained the responsibility of rescue campaigns. Village authorities cautioned repeatedly about the mountain's dangers, but their guidance frequently went disregarded. The mountain had transformed into a burial ground as well as an objective. Each expedition climbed past memorial stone piles, indicating previous tragedies. The pursuit for Noah's vessel had claimed additional existences than any other archaeological quest in contemporary chronicles. The infamous Durupinar site emerges. 20 miles southward of Mount Ararat, an unusual structure ascends from the Turkish hillside. From aerial perspective, it resembles a substantial craft embedded in the terrain. The configuration extends 515 feet in dimension, approximately corresponding with scriptural characterizations of Noah's vessel. This constitutes the Durupinar location, designated after the Turkish aviation operator who initially photographed it in 1959. The structure captured attention immediately. Aerial images displayed what seemed to be a ship's framework, complete with elevated sides and a pointed forward section. The proportions aligned closely with scriptural measurements provided in cubits. Even doubters acknowledged the resemblance was remarkable. Turkish officials investigated initially. They dispatched archaeologists to examine the location in 1960. The group discovered no documentation of crafted timber or human assembly. Their assessment concluded the structure was natural, generated by geological procedures over millennia. The rejection didn't satisfy everyone. American investigator Ron Wyatt materialized in 1977, persuaded the location contained the remains of Noah's vessel. Wyatt introduced metal identification devices, ground-penetrating radar, and absolute conviction in his objective. His preliminary surveys generated fascinating outcomes. The metal identification devices registered substantial signals throughout the structure. Wyatt interpreted these as iron fasteners and fixings employed in the vessel's assembly. Ground-penetrating radar exposed what seemed to be internal constructions, possibly platforms or chambers. The documentation appeared to validate the location's artificial genesis. Wyatt's passion captured international interest. He structured expeditions that introduced volunteers from throughout the world to the hillside. They excavated meticulously, recording every finding with images and measurements. The operation exposed apparent timber specimens and metal pieces. Laboratory examination of the specimens produced mixed outcomes. Some timber appeared to be mineralized, converted to mineral through substance replacement over centuries. Chemical evaluations indicated the existence of organic materials consistent with ancient timber. Carbon analysis demonstrated inconclusive, with outcomes spanning from hundreds to thousands of years. The metal pieces introduced their own enigmas. They possessed iron concentrations elevated above regional soil specimens. Some fragments displayed indications of intentional formation, as if hammered into particular configurations. Wyatt asserted these were fasteners and brackets from the vessel's assembly. Scientific condemnation intensified as Wyatt's assertions expanded boldly. Geologists emphasized that the structure occupied a recognized landslide territory. The craft-like configuration could readily result from natural deterioration and settling. The metal concentrations might originate from mineralization procedures common throughout the territory. Wyatt responded by inviting additional investigators to examine the location. He structured symposiums where advocates introduced documentation for the location's artificial genesis. The occasions attracted hundreds of participants, including both believers and doubters. Discussions grew intense as interpretations conflicted. The Turkish administration initially endorsed Wyatt's investigation. They designated the location as a national preserve and constructed signs identifying it as Noah's vessel. Tourism escalated as visitors arrived to observe the famous structure. Regional populations benefited from the influx of pilgrims and investigators. Nevertheless, official endorsement wavered as scientific resistance intensified. Turkish archaeologists repeated their earlier determinations, discovering no documentation of human assembly. International geological investigations confirmed the structure's natural genesis. The administration quietly eliminated the identifying signs. Wyatt's most dramatic assertion involved subsurface examination that exposed the vessel's internal configuration. He published diagrams displaying platform arrangements, support beams, and animal containment territories. The thorough illustrations indicated a sophisticated comprehension of ancient ship construction methods. Independent authentication of these assertions demonstrated difficult. Other investigators employing comparable apparatus at the location documented different outcomes. Some identified the same internal constructions Wyatt characterized. Others discovered only natural geological characteristics. The examination technology itself became controversial. The controversy captured media interest worldwide. Television documentaries presented the location, introducing both supporting and opposing perspectives. Publications emerged debating for and against the location's importance. The Durupinar structure became a cultural occurrence beyond its archaeological significance. Detractors observed that the location's elevation presented problems for vessel believers. The structure occupies approximately 6,000 feet above ocean level, substantially below Mount Ararat's peak. If the vessel had settled on the mountains of Ararat, as Genesis characterizes, why would it be discovered at such reduced elevation? Advocates countered that the vessel could have descended from elevated elevations during seismic events or landslides. They referenced the structure's current position in a natural drainage passage. The craft might have relocated gradually over centuries, settling at its current position. The discussion also exposed cultural hostilities about archaeological interpretation. Western investigators frequently approached the location with preconceptions about scriptural chronicles. Regional Turkish scholars emphasized scientific methodology over religious considerations. The conflict highlighted different approaches to documentation and verification. By the 1990s, the scientific agreement had solidified against the location's artificial genesis. Major archaeological institutions rejected assertions about the structure's association to Noah's vessel. University geology departments employed the location as a demonstration in how natural procedures could generate misleading structures. Despite scientific rejection, believers continued visiting the location. They structured pilgrimages that combined religious dedication with amateur archaeology. Some still gathered specimens and performed their own evaluations. The location became a touchstone for conviction-based archaeology. The Durupinar structure remains a curiosity that captures visitors from throughout the world. Its craft-like configuration continues generating wonder and discussion. Whether natural or artificial, the location exemplifies humanity's desire to discover physical documentation for ancient accounts. The controversy surrounding the location exposed deeper realities about conviction and documentation. Individuals perceive what they desire to perceive, particularly when examining ambiguous occurrences. The structure functions as a reflection mirroring the observer's individual beliefs about chronicles and conviction. Scientific examination and questionable documentation follow. When assertions about Noah's vessel discoveries contacted scientific establishments, investigators approached them with standard archaeological procedures. Carbon analysis, geological investigations, and chemical examination became instruments for evaluating the documentation. The outcomes rarely corresponded with the anticipations of vessel hunters. Carbon analysis introduced the initial obstacle. Timber specimens from diverse Ararat expeditions produced dates spanning from contemporary to several millennia old. The most ancient specimens extended back to medieval periods, substantially short of the scriptural timeline. Even these dates didn't demonstrate the timber's association to any ancient craft. The dating procedure itself became controversial. Vessel hunters contended that extreme circumstances on Ararat might have contaminated specimens, making them seem younger than their genuine antiquity. They proposed that volcanic operations or mineral accumulations could have introduced contemporary carbon into ancient timber. Scientists responded that contamination typically makes specimens seem older, not younger. The carbon analysis procedure accounts for most environmental elements that might distort outcomes. Multiple independent laboratories evaluated the same specimens and achieved comparable determinations about their antiquity. Geological examination of the Durupinar location exposed natural structure procedures. The craft-like configuration resulted from sedimentary stratification in an ancient lake foundation. Tectonic operations had tilted and compressed the strata, generating the appearance of a framework. Comparable structures exist throughout the territory. The location's composition corresponded with regional geological configurations. Core specimens displayed the same mineral categories discovered in nearby hillsides. No foreign substances indicated assembly from imported timber. The structure's internal configuration pursued natural stress configurations instead of designed architecture. Chemical examination of supposed metal objects produced unexpected outcomes. Most specimens possessed iron concentrations only marginally elevated above background proportions. The metal existed as natural minerals instead of crafted iron. Spectrographic examination discovered no documentation of ancient smelting or forging methods. Some specimens did possess unusual chemical characteristics. These typically resulted from mineralization procedures that concentrated metals in particular territories. Underground water transporting dissolved minerals could generate metal accumulations that mimicked artificial objects. The chemistry validated natural instead of human genesis. Timber identification became another territory of scientific examination. Specimens from diverse expeditions exemplified different tree varieties, some indigenous to the Ararat territory and others from distant positions. The diversity indicated multiple sources instead of a single ancient construction. Microscopic examination exposed particulars about the timber's chronicles. Growth circles displayed configurations consistent with trees that existed in the territory's climate. Cellular compositions remained intact, suggesting relatively contemporary preservation. Ancient timber typically displays additional degradation and mineral replacement. The preservation itself raised concerns. Timber revealed to Ararat severe circumstances for millennia should display extreme weathering. Instead, numerous specimens appeared relatively recent. Some retained bark and displayed indications of recent cutting instead of ancient revelation. Archaeological context introduced additional problems. Legitimate ancient locations possess multiple categories of documentation beyond merely timber or metal. Pottery fragments, instruments, and other objects typically accompany major constructions. The vessel locations generated only ambiguous material that could possess natural clarifications. Radiocarbon analysis of organic substances near the locations produced inconsistent outcomes. Some specimens indicated human operations in the territory during diverse historical intervals. Others displayed no documentation of ancient occupation. The configuration didn't validate the existence of a substantial ancient construction. Ground-penetrating radar and other geophysical procedures generated conflicting interpretations. The identical data collections validated different determinations depending on who examined them. Vessel hunters perceived internal constructions and architectural characteristics. Geologists identified natural rock structures and soil boundaries. The technology itself possessed limitations in Ararat's conditions. Frozen terrain and mineral accumulations interfered with radar transmissions. Rocky landscape generated false echoes that mimicked artificial constructions. Proper interpretation necessitated extensive experience with the apparatus and regional circumstances. Scientific peer assessment became the ultimate evaluation for vessel assertions. Investigations submitted to archaeological publications underwent examination by independent authorities. The assessment procedure consistently discovered methodological deficiencies, insufficient documentation, or alternative clarifications for the documented discoveries. The absence of peer-assessed publications became a substantial concern. Most vessel investigation emerged in religious publications or self-published materials instead of scientific publications. The scholarly population couldn't assess assertions that weren't introduced through proper channels. International archaeological institutions issued declarations about the vessel pursuits. They emphasized the requirement for rigorous methodology and independent authentication. The institutions articulated anxiety about promoting unsubstantiated assertions as historical reality. The scientific agreement remained transparent. No credible documentation validated the existence of Noah's vessel on Mount Ararat or any other position. The examination exposed natural procedures that could account for all documented discoveries. The pursuit had generated interesting geological specimens, but no archaeological objects. Nevertheless, the scientific rejection didn't conclude the pursuits. Believers questioned the procedures, the motivations, and the competence of the investigators. They contended that conventional archaeology couldn't adequately address supernatural or scriptural occurrences. The discussion exposed fundamental differences about the character of documentation and verification. Some scientists recognized the cultural significance of the vessel account while maintaining doubt about physical documentation. They acknowledged that conviction and science operate in different territories. The pursuit for Noah's vessel exemplified humanity's desire to connect those territories even when the documentation didn't validate the association. The scientific examination ultimately raised additional concerns than it resolved. How do we assess assertions that challenge conventional comprehension? What standards of documentation apply to religiously important locations? The vessel pursuits compelled investigators to examine their individual assumptions about archaeology and verification. The Armenian association emerges. For Armenians, Mount Ararat exemplifies more than a geographical landmark. The mountain materializes on their national insignia, dominates their cultural consciousness, and associates them to their most ancient accounts. The relationship between Armenians and Ararat extends deeper than any contemporary pursuit for Noah's vessel. The mountain dominated the Armenian territory for millennia. Ancient Armenian kingdoms prospered in its shadow, constructing cities and temples that gazed upward toward its snow-blanketed peak. The mountain furnished water for cultivation, mineral for assembly, and a sense of permanence in a frequently turbulent territory. Armenian folklore positioned Noah's vessel on Ararat long before contemporary expeditions commenced. Village authorities recounted accounts passed down through generations about the substantial craft resting somewhere on the mountain's upper inclines. These weren't scientific theories, but cultural convictions interwoven into the composition of Armenian identity. The accounts varied from village to village, but common themes surfaced. Shepherds had glimpsed the vessel during transparent weather, materializing as a dark configuration against the white snow. Climbers had discovered ancient timber and metal pieces. Angels protected the location, preventing casual visitors from approaching excessively closely. Some Armenian households asserted direct association to the vessel through their ancestors. They possessed pieces of timber said to originate from the craft, transmitted down through generations as precious artifacts. These fragments were exhibited during religious ceremonies and consulted during significant household determinations. The Armenian Apostolic Church embraced the vessel tradition while maintaining careful theological distinctions. Church leadership recognized the cultural significance of the accounts without asserting definitive verification of the vessel's position. They emphasized the spiritual importance of the flood chronicle instead of its physical remains. Armenian scholars preserved ancient texts that referenced the vessel's resting position. Medieval chroniclers wrote about pilgrims who ascended Ararat pursuing the craft. These descriptions furnished historical context for the mountain's importance in Armenian civilization, even if they didn't constitute scientific documentation. The relationship between Armenians and Ararat became complicated by political geography. The mountain occupies entirely within contemporary Turkey, separated from Armenia by closed frontiers and political hostilities. Armenians can observe their national representation but cannot readily visit it. This separation intensified Armenian attachment to the mountain. Ararat became a representation of displaced territory, exemplifying not merely the vessel, but all the Armenian villages and churches that previously surrounded its foundation. The mountain embodied both spiritual and political aspirations. Armenian immigrants transported the vessel tradition to populations worldwide. Armenian churches in America, Europe, and elsewhere exhibited images of the mountain and recounted accounts about the vessel. The tradition expanded beyond Armenia's frontiers, discovering fresh audiences and interpretations. George Hagopian exemplified the most famous Armenian association to the vessel pursuit. His childhood recollections of ascending to the vessel with his grandfather became legendary among vessel hunters. Hagopian's account furnished the personal cultural testimony that scientific expeditions lacked. Whether or not Hagopian's description was precise, it reflected authentic Armenian folk convictions about the mountain. Comparable accounts existed in numerous Armenian households, recounted around dining tables and during religious celebrations. The particulars varied, but the underlying conviction remained constant. Armenian involvement in contemporary vessel expeditions introduced cultural understanding that outside investigators frequently lacked. Armenian guides comprehended the mountain's meteorological configurations, dangerous territories, and regional customs. They furnished linguistic capabilities and cultural sensitivity that demonstrated invaluable. Nevertheless, Armenian participation also generated hostilities within the population. Some Armenian scholars worried that sensationalized vessel hunting might trivialize their genuine cultural associations to the mountain. They preferred scholarly archaeological operation to treasure hunting expeditions. The Armenian atrocities of 1915 added another dimension of importance to the vessel tradition. Survivors who escaped their territory preserved recollections of Ararat as a representation of what they had displaced. The mountain became associated with both ancient salvation and contemporary tragedy. These historical experiences influenced Armenian perspectives toward vessel pursuits. Some perceived the expeditions as confirmation of their cultural convictions, verification that the world acknowledged Armenia's special relationship with the mountain. Others perceived them as foreign intrusions that disregarded regional understanding and traditions. Armenian artists and writers extracted inspiration from the vessel tradition. Paintings portrayed the mountain with the vessel visible on its inclines. Poetry celebrated the association between Armenian identity and the scriptural chronicle. Literature investigated themes of survival, conviction, and territory through the vessel account. The tradition also shaped Armenian architecture and design. Churches incorporated vessel imagery into their decorations. Residences exhibited carvings and tapestries, displaying the mountain and craft. The vessel became a recurring motif in Armenian visual civilization. Contemporary Armenian historians have commenced examining the vessel tradition as a cultural occurrence instead of a historical assertion. They record the accounts, examine their variations, and trace their evolution over time. This scholarly approach preserves the tradition while recognizing its symbolic instead of factual importance. The Armenian association to Noah's vessel exposes how ancient accounts become intertwined with ethnic identity. The mountain and its legendary inhabitant furnished Armenians with a sense of chosenness, a conviction that their territory possessed special importance in divine chronicles. This association persists despite political transformations and geographical separation. Armenian populations worldwide continue asserting Ararat as their own, regardless of current frontiers or governmental approaches. The mountain remains Armenian in cultural, if not political terms. The vessel tradition also demonstrates how religious chronicles can become ethnic indicators. For Armenians, conviction in the vessel's existence on Ararat distinguishes them from their neighbors and associates them to ancient scriptural chronicles. The tradition functions both spiritual and cultural purposes. Contemporary Armenian scholars continue investigating their population's relationship with the mountain. They gather oral chronicles, examine ancient texts, and record artistic depictions of the vessel tradition. This operation preserves cultural recollection while recognizing the complex relationship between conviction and documentation. Politics, propaganda, and conviction intertwine. The pursuit for Noah's vessel never existed in a political vacuum. From the occasion Russian soldiers initially ascended Ararat in the 19th century, the expeditions became entangled with national priorities, religious objectives, and propaganda initiatives. The mountain's position at the convergence of empires rendered every pursuit inherently political. The Ottoman Empire initially perceived Western expeditions with mistrust. European investigators exemplified potential intelligence operatives or advance representatives for colonial expansion. Representatives granted authorizations reluctantly and assigned guards to observe foreign operations. The vessel pursuits became diplomatic negotiations as much as archaeological expeditions. World War I converted the territory around Ararat into a combat zone. Russian personnel occupied the mountain temporarily, performing their own pursuits while confronting Turkish military. The conflict generated chaos that some asserted eliminated documentation of the vessel's position. Others proposed that wartime pursuits had been more successful than peacetime attempts. The Armenian atrocities transpired in the shadow of Mount Ararat. Turkish personnel systematically eliminated Armenian populations that had existed around the mountain for centuries. The tragedy severed traditional associations between regional populations and the vessel accounts they had preserved. The new Turkish Republic adopted different approaches toward vessel pursuits. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk's administration emphasized modernization and secular governance. Biblical archaeology conflicted with the fresh national identity that gazed toward Europe instead of ancient Middle Eastern traditions. Soviet fascination in the vessel pursuits reflected Cold War hostilities. American expeditions to Ararat were perceived as potential intelligence-gathering campaigns. CIA involvement in some pursuits confirmed these suspicions. The mountain transformed into a battleground within the wider ideological conflict, separating East from West. New political complexities emerged throughout the 1960s. Kurdish separatist groups were active throughout the territory surrounding Ararat. High security measures maintained by Turkish military presence made planning expeditions difficult. Researchers discovered themselves trapped among rival armed factions and governmental forces. American evangelical missions carried underlying political meanings. They showcased the confidence and abundant resources of American Christianity throughout the Cold War era. Finding the Ark successfully would confirm not only biblical belief, but also American cultural dominance. These searches evolved into demonstrations of soft power. Turkish officials understood the propaganda potential inherent in Ark hunting missions. Expeditions achieving success would draw worldwide attention plus tourism toward the area. Government officials backed certain searches, yet retained security worries regarding foreign scientists working close to vulnerable border regions. The 1979 Iranian Revolution altered regional power dynamics surrounding Ararat. The mountain lies in close proximity to Iran's border, transforming expeditions into possible security threats. Revolutionary guards occasionally opened fire on climbers whom they confused with border infiltrators. The quest for Noah's Ark turned genuinely perilous because of political strains. Religious power struggles within Christianity additionally shaped the expeditions. Various denominational organizations competed to become the first discovering definitive evidence of the Ark's presence. Achievement would confirm specific theological viewpoints and boost particular churches' standing throughout the wider Christian world. Television evangelism's emergence introduced fresh dimensions to Ark searching's political elements. Televangelists utilized expedition videos to generate funding and expand their viewership. These searches transformed into entertainment equally as much as archaeology, carrying political consequences for religious broadcasting's impact on American society. The 1991 Soviet Union collapse created fresh opportunities for Ark investigation. Cold War termination diminished security worries around Ararat. Nevertheless, regional turmoil persisted as ethnic battles broke out across the Caucasus region. The mountain stayed politically delicate notwithstanding decreased superpower conflicts. Turkey's NATO membership made American expedition organization complicated. Allied connections demanded careful equilibrium between encouraging research and honoring Turkish independence. The Pentagon occasionally stepped in whenever Ark searches risked military partnership between both nations. The Kurdish issue stayed a continual element in expedition politics. Turkish armed forces sustained counterinsurgency campaigns throughout the territory around Ararat. Foreign scientists needed military protection and encountered limitations on their travel. The Ark searches grew entangled within Turkey's domestic security priorities. Israeli attention toward the Ark searches mirrored wider Middle Eastern political forces. Israeli scholars and religious authorities envisioned potential confirmation of Jewish plus Christian heritage. Yet Israel's connections with Muslim nations restricted direct participation in searches across Turkish land. Christian Zionism's expansion in America forged fresh political links to the Ark searches. Evangelical backers of Israel perceived successful Ark location as validation of biblical prophecy. These searches became components of wider political backing for Israeli Middle East policies. Russian participation in Ark searches reflected post-Soviet spiritual resurgence. Orthodox Christianity underwent rebirth following decades of state persecution. Russian missions to Ararat signified both spiritual pursuit and geopolitical proclamation throughout the former Soviet domain. The European Union's connection with Turkey established fresh political frameworks for Ark missions. EU membership talks mandated Turkey enhance human rights and diminish military authority over civilian matters. These modifications potentially helped foreign scientists pursuing Ararat access. Modern Ark searches keep reflecting political strains. American mission participants occasionally encountered doubt regarding their governmental ties, and Turkish officials weigh tourism advantages against security worries. The mountain stays a location where belief encounters politics through intricate pathways. The promotional worth of Ark findings reaches beyond religious circles. National honor, cultural authentication, and worldwide recognition all hinge on expedition achievement. These searches symbolize rivalries among contrasting worldviews and governmental structures. News reporting of Ark missions frequently mirrors political prejudices. Western reporters stress religious liberty and scholarly investigation. Regional press emphasizes independence and cultural genuineness. Identical expeditions produce varying stories based on political viewpoints. The persistent quest for Noah's Ark shows how ancient narratives stay meaningful to present-day politics. The mountain plus its mythical occupant supply symbols, which varied organizations employ to promote their individual purposes. Belief and politics stay interconnected through methods that complicate supposedly neutral archaeological investigation. The modern-day Ark hunters. The 21st century introduced fresh technology to the timeless search for Noah's Ark. Contemporary missions to Mount Ararat transport equipment that previous generations of Ark seekers couldn't have conceived. Satellite pictures, ground-penetrating radar systems, and unmanned aerial reconnaissance have transformed the pursuit. Although the mountain's enigmas stay as mysterious as always, digital imaging revolutionized how missions record their finds. High-resolution photography equipment captures specifics that film-based photographers could have overlooked. GPS units document precise positions of discoveries. Digital databases archive and examine mission information through methods impossible throughout the analog period. The Internet linked Ark seekers globally, establishing worldwide networks of faithful supporters and investigators. Web discussion boards distribute mission accounts, examine pictures, and argue the importance of multiple findings. Crowdfunding websites enable backers to bankroll missions from any global location. Daniel McGivern embodies the contemporary Ark hunter's character. The American entrepreneur utilized his fortune to sponsor numerous missions to Ararat throughout the 2000s. His groups transported the newest electronic gear and kept continuous contact with backup crews through satellite communication devices. McGivern's missions used systematic search configurations directed by GPS positioning. Group participants covered assigned zones using metal detection devices and ground-penetrating radar systems. They recorded each irregularity using digital imaging and exact position information. The methodical methodology impressed Turkish officials who authorized numerous licenses. The missions found timber frameworks hidden beneath ice and stone close to Ararat's peak. Carbon analysis indicated the lumber was roughly 4,800 years in age, near biblical timing for Noah's deluge. The finding created worldwide press coverage and ignited fresh cycles of argument regarding the Ark's reality. Separate confirmation of McGivern's assertions proved challenging. Turkish officials limited entrance to the finding location, referencing security worries. Additional mission groups couldn't duplicate the results or reach identical spots. The timber specimens stayed in Turkish possession, restricting further examination. Chinese mission groups contributed alternative viewpoints to the Ark pursuit. The Hong Kong-situated Noah's Ark Ministries International performed thorough surveys employing thermal detection and three-dimensional scanning equipment. Their 2010 mission asserted discovering compartments within a timber framework on Ararat. The Chinese group's results featured what seemed like timber partitions, flooring, and structural supports. They calculated the framework's measurements and produced comprehensive architectural diagrams. The finding location was positioned at roughly 13,000 feet altitude, well beyond the vegetation boundary where native timber wouldn't typically occur. Video documentation from the Chinese mission displayed group participants investigating what seemed like manufactured chambers within the mountain. The areas held timber boards connected using rudimentary building methods. The wood's age and state implied considerable antiquity, although exact dating stayed disputed. Doubters challenged the Chinese results almost right away. Some proposed the group had been tricked by regional guides who had built counterfeit chambers to draw tourist missions. Others identified contradictions in the video documentation and challenged the group's archaeological approach. The dispute emphasized persistent conflicts between faith-driven investigation and scholarly archaeology. Ark seekers confronted their findings carrying assumptions regarding what they anticipated locating. Expert archaeologists required more stringent verification before acknowledging assertions regarding ancient frameworks. Contemporary Turkish officials kept intricate connections with Ark missions. Tourism income from the searches helped regional populations around Ararat. Nevertheless, the administration also encountered disapproval for permitting unscientific assertions to be advertised as historical truth. Social media's emergence established fresh venues for Ark seekers to distribute their findings. YouTube recordings from missions contacted millions of observers globally. Facebook organizations arranged backers and doubters into rival groups. Twitter arguments regarding mission results became widespread throughout religious networks. Expert archaeologists progressively employed social media to analyze Ark hunting assertions. They identified methodological weaknesses, supplied different interpretations for findings, and informed the audience regarding correct archaeological procedures. The arguments grew more accessible and visible than previously. Current missions have included unmanned aircraft equipment for overhead investigation. Remote-controlled flying machines can reach hazardous zones that human mountaineers cannot securely access. High-resolution photography equipment and heat detection devices supply comprehensive pictures of possible finding locations from various perspectives. The unmanned aircraft documentation has disclosed formerly unknown specifics regarding Ararat's higher inclines. Ice structures that could hide ancient frameworks are presently observable from overhead. The equipment permits mission groups to organize their searches more productively and securely than ground-level investigation alone. Artificial intelligence started contributing to examining mission information. Software applications can recognize configurations in ground-penetrating radar information that human analysts could overlook. Machine learning systems examine thousands of pictures to recognize possible relics or frameworks. The AI examination has generated fascinating outcomes. Certain software applications recognize consistent configurations in stone structures that could suggest manufactured building. Others identify chemical traces in earth specimens that might propose human presence. The equipment provides fresh instruments for investigating ancient locations. Yet AI examination additionally establishes fresh opportunities for wrong interpretation. Software applications don't comprehend archaeological setting or natural geological mechanisms. They could recognize configurations that seem manufactured but stem from natural occurrences. Human skill stays vital for understanding technological results. Present-day Ark seekers encounter varied obstacles than their forerunners. Environmental shifts have modified climate configurations around Ararat, rendering certain zones more reachable, yet making others more hazardous. Ice retreat has revealed formerly concealed zones, but additionally destabilized ice structures that previously supplied secure routes. The contemporary missions draw participants from various origins. Scientists, religious scholars, thrill seekers, and filmmakers participate in groups pursuing the Ark. Each organization contributes distinct drives and anticipations to the pursuit, establishing intricate forces within mission groups. Social media has made the Ark pursuit accessible in surprising methods. Non-professional investigators can presently reach satellite pictures, geological examinations, and historical records that were previously limited to expert archaeologists. Web networks examine mission information and recommend fresh pursuit approaches. The accessibility has created both advantages and difficulties. Passionate non-professionals occasionally recognize encouraging possibilities that experts had missed. Yet, they additionally advocate ideas grounded in inadequate proof or misinterpreted information. The meaningful data within ARC investigation has grown progressively challenging to control. Contemporary mission financing depends substantially on collective funding and religious contributions. Web venues permit faithful supporters globally to supply modest sums to jointly sponsor significant missions. The financing approach provides backers emotional commitment in mission results. The monetary strain establishes motivations to generate striking outcomes. Mission coordinators understand that contributors anticipate findings, not merely cautious scholarly examinations. The strain can result in exaggerating, unclear results, or hastening to judgments grounded in restricted proof. Turkish officials have crafted more advanced methods to overseeing ARC missions. They presently demand comprehensive investigation proposals, competent archaeological monitoring, and thorough insurance protection. The licensing mechanism has grown more expert, yet staying politically delicate. Current geopolitical conflicts have made mission organization complicated. Regional battles, extremist dangers, and frontier security worries all influence entrance to Mount Ararat. Missions must maneuver not merely the mountain's bodily perils, but additionally intricate political dangers. The COVID-19 outbreak briefly stopped most ARC missions. Movement limitations and wellness worries blocked worldwide groups from accessing Turkey. The interruption permitted scientists to examine prior results and organize more methodical upcoming pursuits. Virtual reality equipment presently permits individuals to witness Ararat missions without departing their residences. High-resolution 360-degree photography devices document ascents and pursuits in engaging specificity. VR displays contact viewers who could never bodily participate in missions. The simulated missions fulfill instructional and advertising objectives. They assist, generate funds for genuine pursuits, yet permitting backers to sense attachment to the journey. Nevertheless, they additionally risk establishing artificial closeness with the pursuit mechanism and oversimplifying intricate archaeological matters. Contemporary ARC seekers progressively partner with scholarly organizations. Universities supply scholarly skill and reputation, yet mission groups provide financing and entrance to isolated locations. These alliances generate more thorough investigation, but additionally establish conflicts between faith-grounded and non-religious methods. The partnerships have produced enhanced comprehension of Ararat's geological features and archaeology. Even missions that don't locate the ARC supply worthwhile information regarding the mountain's biological past. The scholarly secondary products frequently demonstrate more enduring than the fundamental religious goals. Present-day pursuit methods feature environmental genetic material collection that can identify ancient biological substances. Chemical examination of ice samples could disclose proof of substantial timber frameworks. Multispectral photography can recognize hidden items undetectable to regular imaging. These sophisticated methods have identified fascinating irregularities, but no absolute verification of Noah's Ark. Each fresh equipment generates expectations, yet additionally furnishing more exact methods to remove incorrect possibilities. The pursuit grows at the same time more advanced and more demanding. The contemporary ARC pursuit mirrors wider transformations in how individuals pursue significance and reality. Digital equipment supplies remarkable entrance to data, yet additionally permitting the distribution of false data. The ARC pursuit demonstrates both the potential and the risk of accessible investigation. Ararat's deadly mystique. Mount Ararat exists as among Earth's most perilous summits, taking lives with merciless productivity. The mountain's volcanic beginnings established unstable landscape that moves without notice. Loose stone tumbles down its inclines, set off by air currents, thermal fluctuations, or the footfalls of careless mountaineers. The height alone presents continual dangers. At 16,854 feet, The peak achieves elevations where breathable air concentrations fall critically reduced. Mountaineers unaccustomed to elevation endure migraines, queasiness, and disorientation that can produce deadly errors. The sparse atmosphere renders each movement an exertion and obscures reasoning when lucid consideration grows most essential. Climate on Ararat transforms with fatal rapidity. Transparent dawn atmospheres can shift into screaming snowstorms within moments. Thermal variations of 50 degrees happen consistently. Mountaineers surprised ill-equipped encounter exposure that can solidify body parts or reduce core warmth to fatal concentrations. The mountain's ice displays specific dangers. Glacial crevasses conceal underneath harmless snow connections that fail beneath human mass. Seracs, looming blocks of precarious ice, topple without notice, flattening anything along their trajectory. The ice expanse close to the peak moves continually, creating fresh openings and shutting recognized paths. Avalanches position among Ararat's most fatal dangers. The mountain's precipitous inclines gather snow that grows progressively precarious as thermal levels vary. A solitary, noisy sound or slight shake can set off cascades that entomb mountaineers beneath masses of snow and wreckage. The remoteness of Ararat intensifies each peril. The closest medical facility rests moments distant by flying machine. Presuming climate allows Joyorn aircraft. Numerous incidents happen in zones where removal is unachievable until situations enhance. Wounded mountaineers must endure independently until assistance can contact them. Investigation and recovery missions on Ararat encounter remarkable obstacles. Turkish armed personnel prepared for alpine recovery must frequently pause days for secure aircraft situations. Grounded recovery groups need duration to arrange and contact isolated incident locations. The mountain's magnitude and intricacy can hide casualties for periods. The mental elements of Ararat's peril are similarly substantial. The mountain's commanding appearance influences mountaineers' psychological condition. Certain individuals undergo overpowering nervousness when nearing the peak. Others cultivate incorrect assurance that produces dangerous choices. The mental strain adds to weak reasoning and avoidable incidents. Gear malfunctions demonstrate particularly fatal in Ararat's surroundings. Regular mountaineering equipment can break down in severe cold. Electronic instruments cease operating when power cells solidify. Contact gear malfunctions exactly when mountaineers require assistance most critically. The mountain appears to deliberately oppose human equipment. The pursuit for Noah's Ark has amplified the human expense of ascending Ararat. Missions frequently transport substantial scholarly gear that reduces travel and raises exposure duration. The concentration on particular pursuit zones can direct groups into especially hazardous landscape they could otherwise evade. Religious drive occasionally promotes extreme danger acceptance on Ararat. Faithful individuals may understand close calls as heavenly safety and advance beyond secure boundaries. The spiritual importance of the journey can supersede sensible security factors. Belief transforms into a weakness when it substitutes meticulous organization. Regional escorts on Ararat hold essential awareness but encounter their individual strains. Tourist earnings relies on accomplished missions, establishing motivations to try ascents in borderline situations. Escorts occasionally minimize dangers to prevent losing customers. The financial strain opposes security duties. The mountain's volcanic character establishes extra dangers that mountaineers frequently disregard. Sulfur vapor releases can trigger respiratory challenges at elevated heights. Thermal springs, the mountain stays a functioning geological arrangement, able to abrupt modifications. Darkness on Ararat introduces particular perils. Thermal levels drop instantly as the sun vanishes. Direction grows extremely challenging in obscurity. The mixture of cold, elevation, and bewilderment has demonstrated deadly for numerous mountaineers surprised beyond secure heights following dusk. The air currents on Ararat can achieve typhoon intensity without notice. Blasts, powerful enough to topple mountaineers off their balance, happen consistently close to the peak. Wind-driven cold can solidify revealed skin in moments. The persistent battering exhausts mountaineers and renders exact actions almost unachievable. Fluid loss presents a delicate but grave danger on Ararat. The arid atmosphere and bodily effort unite to drain mountaineers quicker than they understand. Fluid loss weakens reasoning and bodily capability exactly when both are most essential. Numerous incidents involve mountaineers whose consideration was damaged by liquid depletion. The mountain's standing draws unpracticed mountaineers who minimize its perils. The religious importance of Ararat attracts individuals without suitable mountaineering preparation. Social networks and film reporting occasionally romanticize the ascending encounter, yet minimizing the genuine dangers present. Medical crises on Ararat frequently demonstrate deadly because of the impossibility of rapid removal. Cardiac arrests, cerebral incidents, and critical wounds demand instant care that isn't obtainable on the mountain. The elevation alone can set off medical emergencies in individuals with fundamental wellness situations. The expense of recovery missions has directed Turkish officials to mandate mission protection and crisis payments. Groups must show monetary capacity to fund possible recovery missions. The mandates assist guarantee that recovery assets are obtainable, but additionally restrict entrance to those with sufficient financing. Contemporary security gear has diminished certain perils on Ararat, yet establishing fresh ones. GPS instruments can malfunction or supply incorrect assurance in direction. Satellite contact devices operate solely when climate allows signal broadcast. Equipment supplements, but cannot substitute alpine abilities and cautious reasoning. The mountain's magnificence frequently calms mountaineers into overconfidence regarding its perils. Remarkable perspectives and flawless climate can occur alongside life-endangering situations. The opposition between Ararat's optical attraction and its fatal character has surprised numerous mountaineers ill-equipped for abrupt modifications. Retrieval of remains from Ararat occasionally demonstrates unachievable because of perilous situations or unreachable positions. Relatives of vanished mountaineers encounter the extra sorrow of never managing to supply appropriate interment. The mountain retains certain of its casualties indefinitely, contributing to its enigma and fear. The loss figures for Ararat create serious examination. The mountain has taken more existences per mission than most alternative summits of comparable elevation. The pursuit for Noah's Ark has contributed to this cost, with religious missions representing a disproportionate quantity of incidents and fatalities. Where the Ark may rest. Following decades of pursuing numerous missions and innumerable ideas, the matter stays. Where could Noah's Ark genuinely rest? The gathered proof indicates multiple opportunities, each carrying persuasive reasoning and considerable difficulties. The customary location close to Ararat's peak possesses the most powerful biblical backing. Genesis particularly references the mountains of Ararat, and the summit's distinction renders it a logical resting location for a craft pursuing the initial arid ground. The height guarantees conservation in everlasting ice, safeguarding biological substances from deterioration. Yet the peak position encounters sensible challenges. The severe height establishes situations that would have eliminated most biological substances across thousands of years. The persistent freeze-melt patterns, volcanic movement, and geological precariousness oppose extended conservation at such elevations. The northeastern tableland of Ararat provides a balanced position. This zone rests elevated sufficiently to correspond biblical accounts, yet staying beneath the most severe situations of the peak. Multiple missions have documented timber frameworks in this territory, although none have supplied definitive verification. The Ahora Canyon symbolizes another customary possibility. Regional folklore positions the Ark in this striking gorge on Ararat's northern incline. The canyon supplies safety from air currents and avalanches, yet staying reachable to resolute pursuers. Armenian tradition persistently recognizes this zone as the Ark's position. Current missions favor the Western methods to Ararat. Satellite pictures have disclosed fascinating structures in this less investigated territory. The landscape provides possible concealment locations that previous missions could have overlooked. Environmental shifts have revealed formerly ice-blanketed zones that might hold conserved frameworks. The Durupinar location, 20 miles from Ararat, keeps drawing backers notwithstanding scholarly dismissal. The structure's vessel-resembling form and suitable measurements correspond biblical accounts. Faithful individuals contend that the ark descended from Ararat's elevations throughout ancient tremors or deluges. Different ideas position the ark on adjacent summits in the Ararat formation. These mountains obtain reduced focus from pursuers, but provide comparable conservation situations. Regional customs occasionally recognize alternative summits as the ark's resting location. Proposing the biblical citation includes a wider zone. Geological factors make all position ideas complicated. Ararat's volcanic movement has restructured the mountain continually across thousands of years. Molten rock currents, tremors, and wearing away might have hidden, relocated, or eliminated any ancient framework. The mountain we observe presently varies substantially from its ancient arrangement. Ice transportation configurations on Ararat propose possible conveyance of timber substances. Ice movement might transport ark fragments distant from their initial landing location. The finding of lumber at multiple heights could stem from this biological conveyance instead of showing the ark's genuine resting location. Below-ground positions obtain growing focus from contemporary pursuers. Ground-penetrating detection has identified empty areas that might accommodate substantial frameworks. Molten rock passages and biological caverns could have safeguarded the ark from exterior perils, yet retaining it concealed from informal watching. The conservation demands for a 4,000-year-old timber framework restrict possible positions. The ark would require safety from breathable air, wetness fluctuation, and thermal extremes. Limited surroundings on Ararat supply all these situations at the same time. Permafrost areas provide the optimal conservation capability. Zones where terrain stays indefinitely solidified might keep biological substances for thousands of years. These areas occur on Ararat's higher inclines, but move position as environmental configurations modify across duration. Chemical examination of liquid sources around Ararat could supply hints to the ark's position. Timber frameworks would release biological mixtures into adjacent underground liquid. Unique chemical traces might recognize zones where substantial quantities of ancient lumber are available. The biblical schedule establishes extra limitations on possible positions. If the deluge happened roughly 4,000 years previously, the ark's fragments must endure in situations that occurred across that duration. Environmental modifications, volcanic movement, and geological movements all influence possible conservation locations. Contemporary pursuit equipment provides fresh opportunities for positioning the ark. Satellite-grounded heat detection can identify below-ground frameworks by their warmth traces. Magnetic measurement recognizes metal groupings that could show vessel attachments or instruments. These methods can examine substantial zones productively. Yet equipment additionally discloses the restrictions of prior pursuits. Numerous zones recognized as encouraging by previous missions display no exceptional characteristics when examined with contemporary devices. The mountain possesses limited mysteries than hopeful pursuers previously accepted. The magnitude limitations of Noah's Ark influence position opportunities. A framework 450 feet extended and 75 feet broad demands considerable level zone for stable arrangement. Limited positions on Ararat supply sufficient area for such a substantial craft without considerable landscape alteration. Reachability factors shape ideas regarding the ark's position. The craft would require to have settled in a zone contactable by Noah and his relatives when departing. Severely isolated or perilous positions appear contradictory with the biblical account of accomplished departure. Climate configurations around Ararat establish small-scale environments that might influence conservation. Zones safeguarded from dominant air currents could provide superior situations for keeping biological substances. South-oriented inclines obtain more solar energy that might quicken deterioration mechanisms. The lack of connected relics makes position ideas complicated. Noah's Ark would apparently be joined by instruments, ceramics, and additional human fragments from its travelers. The total lack of such substances from all suggested locations generates matters regarding their genuineness. Numerous rival positions propose either that the Ark has been overlooked completely or that the pursuit alone may be misled. The expansion of possibilities without absolute verification shows the tremendous obstacle of positioning any ancient framework on such an enormous and perilous mountain. Upcoming pursuit actions will probably concentrate on zones not yet completely investigated. The mountain's magnitude guarantees that isolated territories stay unexamined. Fresh equipment and modifying environmental situations keep disclosing formerly concealed zones that could hold the ancient craft. The matter of where the Ark may rest finally relies on weighing biblical understanding, geological actuality, and conservation demands. Each suggested position encounters considerable obstacles that block absolute recognition. The enigma continues because no solitary location fulfills all the essential situations for being Noah's ultimate resting location. The legacy of the search. The journey for Noah's Ark has extended more than 200 years, depleted millions of monetary units, and taken numerous existences. Still, the pursuit persists with unlessened enthusiasm, propelled by influences more profound than archaeological interest. The inheritance of this mission discloses essential realities regarding human character, belief, and our connection with ancient narratives. The pursuit has generated no indisputable proof of Noah's Ark, but it has created considerable scholarly awareness regarding Mount Ararat and the encircling territory. Geological examinations performed by mission groups have charted the mountain's framework in remarkable specificity. Climate observation facilities supply information regarding elevated height situations that advantages weather scientists and environmental investigators. Archaeological methods crafted for Ark pursuing have discovered uses in alternative settings. Ground-penetrating detection, satellite picture examination, and ice sample collection approaches developed on Ararat presently assist traditional archaeology globally. The pursuit has propelled technological advancement even without accomplishing its fundamental goal. The missions have established a comprehensive historical documentation of human engagement with among Earth's most demanding summits. Mission accounts record modifications in the mountain's ice blanketing, geological characteristics, and reachability across decades. This data demonstrates worthwhile for comprehending environmental shifts and geological mechanisms. Travel around Mount Ararat has expanded considerably because of Ark-connected advertising. Regional populations that previously existed in remoteness presently accommodate guests from around the planet. Accommodations, dining facilities, and escort operations supply financial chances that didn't occur before the pursuit commenced. The Ark hunt has delivered surprising wealth to the territory. Educational organizations have crafted curricula that employ the Ark search as an investigation study in analytical consideration. Pupils examine mission assertions, assess proof, and acquire to separate between belief and scholarly inquiry. The pursuit supplies actual planet illustrations of how assumptions can shape understanding of information. The mission writings have established a considerable collection of material regarding exploration, belief, and finding. Publications, films, and compositions regarding Ark pursuing attract viewers well beyond those focused on biblical archaeology. The narratives access universal subjects of journey and determination. Exhibition presentations showcasing supposed Ark substances draw guests globally. Whether genuine or otherwise, these presentations create audience fascination in ancient past and archaeology. The Ark search has presented millions of individuals to archaeological approaches and biblical scholarship. The pursuit has encouraged worldwide partnership among investigators from varied nations and societies. Turkish officials have collaborated with missions from America, Europe, and Asia. These partnerships have constructed connections that reach beyond the particular pursuit for Noah's Ark. Religious networks have discovered significance in the pursuit irrespective of its final achievement or disappointment. The missions show belief in movement, displaying faithful individuals prepared to commit duration, resources, and exertion in following their principles. The pursuit alone transforms into a type of journey and spiritual practice. The arguments encircling Ark assertions have encouraged significant conversations regarding the connection between belief and proof. How should religious convictions engage with scholarly approaches? What represents sufficient verification for assertions regarding ancient occurrences? These matters reach well beyond biblical archaeology. Scholarly organizations have struggled with how to confront ARC, pursuing assertions accountably. Universities must weigh regard for religious convictions with dedication to scholarly thoroughness. The pursuit has required educational organizations to explain their criteria for assessing remarkable assertions. The ARC pursuit has shaped widespread society through methods that reach beyond religious settings. Exploration films, broadcast programs, and fiction extract motivation from mission narratives. The pursuit has transformed into component of present-day folklore regarding treasure pursuing and finding. Legal examples created by ARC missions influence alternative archaeological activity. Licensing mechanisms, protection demands, and security criteria crafted for Ararat presently pertain to investigation globally. The pursuit has assisted create worldwide standards for mission behavior. The mental elements of the pursuit have drawn examination from behavioral scholars. Why do individuals commit tremendous assets in following objectives with reduced likelihood of achievement? The ARC pursuit supplies perspectives into drive, determination, and the function of belief in human choice creation. Protection actions around Mount Ararat have gained from mission focus. Ecological observation, refuse control procedures, and effect evaluations crafted for ARC pursuits assist safeguard the mountain's delicate environment. The pursuit has unintentionally advanced ecological management. The mission's security procedures have shaped mountaineering customs internationally. Crisis mechanisms, contact arrangements, and gear criteria developed on Ararat presently assist mountaineers globally. The perilous character of the pursuit has progressed alpine security equipment. Cultural conservation actions have recorded regional customs regarding the ARC that could, alternatively, have been forfeited. Cultural researchers joining missions have documented narratives, melodies, and convictions regarding the mountain. The pursuit has assisted conserve intangible cultural inheritance. The worldwide press reporting of ARC missions has formed audience comprehension of archaeology and biblical investigations. News accounts, films, and social network posts contact viewers who could never experience scholarly archaeology. The pursuit has made accessible conversation of ancient past. Scholarly doubt has been reinforced by the requirement to assess ARC assertions. Investigators have crafted superior approaches for evaluating remarkable archaeological declarations. The pursuit has enhanced quality assurance in archaeological investigation. The technological inheritance features advancements in distant detection, information examination, and mission organization. Gear crafted for the severe situations on Ararat has discovered uses in polar investigation, catastrophe reaction, and armed missions. The pursuit has propelled technological progress throughout numerous areas. The pursuit has established a planetary network of supporters who distribute data, assets, and motivation. Web discussion boards, meetings, and releases link ARC pursuers globally. This network continues irrespective of mission results, joined by distributed enthusiasm instead of accomplished findings. The conceptual matters generated by the pursuit keep resonating in present-day conversations regarding reality, proof, and conviction. How do we separate between valid investigation and hopeful consideration? What function should belief contribute in factual examination? The ARC pursuit has rendered these theoretical matters tangible and urgent. The inheritance of the pursuit finally surpasses its initial goal. Whether or not Noah's Ark rests on Mount Ararat, the journey to locate it has created awareness, encouraged partnership, and motivated contemplation on essential matters regarding human character and heavenly intention. The pursuit alone has transformed into more important than its objective, establishing an enduring effect that reaches well beyond any solitary finding. The mountain retains its mysteries, but the pursuit has disclosed realities regarding those who pursue.